Oh my God, are you serious? A month after having my daughter, I came back home from my parents' house. Then my husband, Jake, came home from work. When he saw me, he dropped his bag at the door and said, "You don't look very different from before." Excuse me? I'm Sarah, 31 years old. I've been a stay-at-home mom since I had my baby a month ago. I had stayed with my parents after the birth, and I was so excited to finally start our life as a family of 3 back at home. But when I came back, my husband, Jake, greeted me with cold comments. I was completely shocked. I couldn't believe he would say something like that before even meeting his daughter. We had met at work. I was in accounting right after high school, and Jake was my boss. We bought a house near my office, but since I'm from another part of the country, I stayed with my parents before giving birth. A month after our daughter, Emma, was born, I came back home with her. Jake hadn't been able to come to the birth because of work, so this was his first time seeing her. And yet, so nice of you to say that. I just traveled all this way with the baby, and this is the welcome I get, I said sarcastically. At first, I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. You know, it looks like you gained 20 pounds, he said. It's normal to gain weight when you're pregnant. It's in the maternity guide. You need that weight to stay healthy and produce milk. I need the energy to deal with the baby crying all night too. There's nothing wrong with that. But honestly, it was so hurtful. On my way home, I had hoped to hear something like, "I've missed you," or "Let me hold our baby." But instead, he didn't even hold Emma and made that comment before walking off to the bedroom. I was completely shocked and hurt. His attitude was just awful. I dropped the diaper bag just like he dropped his. I thought he would be better the next day after a good night's sleep, so I went to bed with Emma in the guest room. But the next day, I realized his behavior was just the beginning. He started mocking me for gaining weight. I had learned that eating sweet potatoes could help with milk production, so when I had some as a snack, he said, "What's a potato doing eating a sweet potato? It's like cannibalism." He then added, "It's gross watching fat people eat. I heard pigs eat grains. Maybe you should eat more grains." Oink. He was finding joy in making fun of me. He also said, "I've been waiting for things to go back to normal between us." As a guy, I thought we'd get right back into it, but I don't think that's happening now. It's going to feel like work. It's unpaid work, and I'm not getting anything out of it. He really turned everything into something negative, even our intimate life. "We need to cut costs," he said. "We won't be having sex until things improve. The reason is simple. You don't look like a woman anymore." He kept mocking me. Every time Jake opened his mouth, it was just another cruel comment about my body. He didn't say anything nice anymore. He didn't help with any housework or childcare either. But honestly, I was okay. I was just happy spending time with Emma. I didn't have to listen to him. I started thinking of him as nothing more than a noisy parrot in the house, and I tried not to let him bother me. Then one day, something happened that made me completely lose it. Jake came home drunk from a work event. He sat down on a chair, leaning over the table. He was facing me while I was breastfeeding Emma next to him. He burped, smelling of alcohol, and started mumbling nonsense. "I don't think babies are as cute as people say. Emma's kind of bald, her skin's all red, and all she does is make weird noises," he said. "What are you talking about?" I asked, shocked. "I'm just being honest. People pretend babies are cute, but they don't really think that," he mumbled. He kept going. "As an accountant, I've got an analytical view of things." "You're not making any sense," I said. "I see you feeding this not-so-cute baby, and I know you gained weight to have her. And now your boobs are probably sagging from breastfeeding. It's gross." "What the hell is wrong with you?" I shouted. "I can't see you as anything but that. I can't sleep with someone who looks like that. It's like being with a different species." Then, without warning, he grabbed my hand and dragged me, with Emma in my arms, into the guest room. "What do you think you're doing?" I tried to fight back, but before I could even scream, he shoved us into the room and slammed the door shut. "Stay in your little nest, roly-poly," he said. And then he started singing a song called Roly-Poly as he went to take a shower. It was unforgivable. He was mocking me and our daughter too. Even if he was drunk, it was completely out of line. I was furious, but I stayed quiet, nursing Emma in the dark room, and went to bed. The next morning, when I opened the door, my anger flared up again. It wasn't just because Jake had left his clothes all over the floor or the used glass on the table. I saw a paper taped to the door of the bedroom I had been shoved into. It said, "Roly-Poly's room." The handwriting was messy, and I knew it was Jake's. I couldn't believe it. That was it. I wasn't going to forgive him for this. Right then and there, I started planning my revenge. The first step was to reinvent myself. I put the Roly-Poly's room sign in my new bedroom. I wanted to look at it every time I felt like giving up. On the opposite wall, I put up a poster of Jennifer Lopez. I had always been a fan of hers. She had amazing style, and she made me want to be like her. It would keep me motivated. And that was the start of my long-term revenge plan in the Roly-Poly's room. There were plenty of workouts I could do at home. I started standing on my toes while moving around the house. Whenever I wanted to sit down, I did squats instead. I did squats while doing laundry, brushing my teeth, and crunches after each feeding. My midwife had told me that postpartum body fat is easier to burn, and she was right. My weight dropped quickly. As Emma got older, I even put her on my stomach during sit-ups, and she laughed every time my face came near hers. I worked on strength training and diet while taking care of her. Before I knew it, I was back to my pre-baby shape. I sweated a lot during workouts, so I kept wearing the tracksuits I wore right after childbirth, just with an elastic waistband instead. I didn't care to dress up for Jake, and of course, I didn't wear makeup either. Jake had nicknamed me Roly-Poly, but he didn't even notice my changes because I kept wearing the same clothes. He wasn't paying attention to me anyway. The second step was to bring Jake down. If I wanted to rise, I had to make him look worse. I started to fatten him up. Since his office didn't have a cafeteria, I made him high-carb lunches with meat and fried food. For dinner, I tempted him with his favorite foods, like pizza and fried chicken, since he usually came home around 9 p.m. I had dinner with Emma at 6 p.m., and my meals were made up of mostly vegetables and a little meat. I minimized my carbs by substituting cauliflower and tofu. It helped me feel less stressed about not having rice or bread. If I ever felt hungry, I'd wait 10 minutes and the hunger would pass. If it didn't, I'd look at myself in the mirror and then at my GLO poster, and the hunger would turn into guilt, helping me control my appetite. I knew that wasn't enough, so I started posting on social media. Every day, I took a picture of my bare belly before I showered. I posted the picture and the exercises I was doing under the handle Sarah at Home Diet. 4 years passed and Emma started preschool. Jake began paying more attention to her once she could talk. But I wasn't ready to forgive him for everything he'd said when I gave birth. I had been holding on to my anger for those 4 years, especially since he had called me Roly-Poly. Once Emma started preschool, I began working part-time at a local fitness club. I was a receptionist and cleaner, but being around health-conscious clients kept me motivated. It felt even better when clients told me, "You look amazing. You're so toned." I was sure I had reached my goal. It was time. I decided I was going to get back at Jake for everything over the past 4 years. I arranged a meeting for Tuesday at 1 p.m. The place was a cafe his parents owned in the city center. It was always crowded thanks to being featured by influencers. They hadn't seen Emma since she was a baby, so I decided to bring her. I was told that Tuesday afternoons were usually slower, and it was easier for them to take a break. They planned to leave the cafe to the staff and spend some time with Emma for the first time in a while. Jake had to work in the morning but took the afternoon off to meet us there. After sending him the message, I took my time getting ready. I carefully applied my makeup and straightened my hair. Normally, I just tied it in a messy knot at home. But today, I made it shiny and sleek. I drew on my eyebrows since they were usually barely there, and instead of my usual tracksuit, I put on a fitted dress. It was a size 6. I wasn't going to let Jake call me Roly-Poly anymore. I purposely arrived at the cafe 10 minutes late. I had already received a text from Jake saying he was there. "You're late. Roly-Poly moves slowly," it said. There was another text when I got to the cafe entrance. Snap. I took a screenshot and put my phone in my bag. I took a deep breath and straightened my shoulders. The door made a sound as Emma and I walked in. My mother-in-law, Lori, saw us first. "You're here," she said, smiling wide. "Oh, it's so nice to see you, Sarah. I missed you. And you too, Emma." "It's been a long time, Lori," I said, kissing her on the cheek. "Let's talk in the back. Jake's already here. Oh, look at you, sweet little bee. She was more focused on playing with her granddaughter than helping the customers. She turned to the staff and asked them to take over. When I walked to the back and saw Jake, he turned around when he heard my footsteps. "How long do you make me wait, Rolly?" he said. But when he saw me, he froze. His eyes went wide, his nostrils flared, and his jaw dropped. I honestly thought his face might break from how wide he opened everything. He just stared at me. "Hi, Jake," I greeted him, keeping my tone distant. "Emma looks so sweet and beautiful, just like you, Sarah," Lori said, joining us with 5 slices of tiramisu, the cafe's bestseller. There was an awkward silence, so I spoke up. "You seem lost for words." "Oh well." Just then, my father-in-law, Mark, walked in. "I've been waiting for you guys. I've missed you, sweet little Emma." His parents gathered around Emma, smiling and playing with her. Jake, on the other hand, forced a tight smile. Well, of course, she got our genes. The tension was building. Without hesitation, I replied, "Well, it's you and Roly-Poly's baby, right?" Jake froze, and his parents stopped playing with Emma. "What did you just say?" Lori asked, confused. "Roly-Poly. That's what he's been calling me," I answered. "He said he couldn't see me as a woman after having the baby." "Wait a minute. I didn't know you lost weight," Lori said. "You didn't notice, did you?" I shot back. "You shut me in a spare room so you didn't have to look at me, right? You didn't see the changes over the last 4 years. You called me Roly-Poly and never even looked at me. You said I was disgusting." I pulled out the piece of paper that said Roly-Poly's room and placed it on the table. My in-laws were stunned. "Mark, Lori," I continued, "I'm sure you can see what I've been dealing with just from this paper. I've been verbally abused for a long time. This isn't the only proof," I added, pulling out my phone. I showed them screenshots of the horrible messages Jake had sent me. I also showed the one he sent when I arrived at the cafe. His parents were shocked by how many there were. "Jake, how could you?" Mark asked, his voice full of disbelief. "Oh, give me a break. Evidence what?" Jake shouted, clearly angry. Then we heard giggles from behind. "Seriously?" 2 teenage girls at a nearby table were laughing at us. How can a creepy old man yell at such a beautiful woman? So wrong. Crazy, creepy, fat, and hot-headed. You. It's like a quadruple handicap. Their laughter echoed at our table. "You call me Roly-Poly, but have you looked at yourself? You're overweight and greasy," I said, pausing for effect. "You look like a beetle." With that, I turned to my in-laws and showed them a picture. "Please take a look. This is Emma right after she was born, and me," I said, showing a photo. "Oh, Emma, you were so tiny. How cute," Lori exclaimed, wiping away tears. "I'm so happy to have you as my grandchild." She looked at the photo and got emotional. When I came back from the hospital, Jake said I was disgusting and unattractive. He even said my breasts and stomach had dropped and gave me the nickname Roly-Poly. He also said Emma wasn't cute. My in-laws were silent, stunned by the photo and my words. I then pulled out a folder of divorce papers from my bag. "I've just shown you the proof of the abuse. I want to end our marriage now," I said firmly. "Wait a minute. You're supposed to be the Roly-Poly that clings to me. How are you planning to support yourself?" Jake asked, shocked. His question caught me off guard, but I was quick to respond. I switched the screen on my phone and showed him my Twitter account, Sarah at Home Diet. "I have over 10,000 followers," I said. I showed the comments below my posts. "Wow, you can tone up so much at home. You're giving all housewives hope. You look amazing. I admire you." Lori suddenly shouted, "Jake, you have no idea what it's like to give birth. It's one of the hardest things a woman's body goes through. We gain weight to prepare for delivery, and we hardly sleep to protect our babies. You don't even try to understand that, and you mock her? Shame on you." She turned to me, tears in her eyes. "Dear, I'm so sorry for what my son has done. I'll do whatever I can to make it right. Let me keep seeing this sweet little one from time to time. We won't bother you, but maybe we can celebrate her birthdays here, without Jake." And so I started a new chapter working as a single mom at a fitness club. My friends tell me, "Wow, you look amazing, Mommy." Sometimes Emma even says it too. I always tell her to be beautiful inside and out, You have to work hard. You need to believe in yourself and be patient to achieve your goals. I hope you'll grow up to be hardworking. As for Jake, or the beetle, as I now call him, Lori tells me he's trying to get back with me by going on a diet, but he can't stick with it and is still overweight. I'm now working full-time at the fitness club, and my Twitter followers have grown to over 20,000. I've even been contacted by a publisher. Housewives can do anything. We just have to take control of our happiness. I want to keep motivating other housewives who are doing their best.
Greetings. My name is Sarah. At 42 years old, I find myself nestled in the comforting warmth of our living room, yet overwhelmed by an undercurrent of grief and longing as I write these words. Newfound courage stirs within me, urging me to shape my emotions into something tangible. This act of writing is not just for my own healing. It's a beacon of hope for others who might find fragments of their own stories in mine. Just a few months ago, my beloved husband Andrew and I were basking in the peace of our 18-year journey together. Then, fate cruelly snatched him away. The ache of his absence is fresh and sharp, as if time itself suspended its movement the moment I heard of his fatal car accident. The future we had dreamed of, one filled with laughter, love, and unwavering companionship, crumbled in an instant. I never imagined that at 42, I would be navigating life as a widow. The bond Andrew and I shared was profound, forged in the fires of adversity. We were like two broken souls who found healing in each other's embrace. My own journey began with abandonment, my parents lost to addiction, leaving behind emotional scars. Andrew, too, had faced his own battles, growing up with a mother, Evelyn, who betrayed him repeatedly with her promises of change, only to fall back into destructive habits, manipulating him to support her addiction before vanishing time and again. Together, Andrew and I built a love that transcended the pain of our pasts. We were each other's refuge, a place of trust and understanding, rising above the wounds life had dealt us. For a time, it felt as though we were finally free of the shadows that had haunted us for so long. 3 years had passed since Evelyn last disrupted our lives, and Andrew had come to accept that she might never change. This story is my way of processing the shared history Andrew and I created and the reality I now face without him. My hope is that it can inspire resilience in others who are grappling with their own turmoil. Our love was powerful enough to heal deep wounds, yet it wasn't enough to protect us from the cruel hand of fate. His sudden departure left me in a storm of sorrow and unanswered questions. How could life be so cruel, taking away the one person who had truly understood and accepted me? In the aftermath of Andrew's loss, I found myself wanting to retreat from the world, seeking solace in the quiet of my bedroom. But time, like death, shows no mercy. It moves on, indifferent to our pain. And so, we began the heart-wrenching task of planning Andrew's funeral. With the passing of each day, I found comfort in the support of friends and family. Together, we navigated the sorrowful farewell, ensuring that Andrew's departure was marked with the dignity he deserved. We organized a funeral at home, a space where we could honor his memory and share stories that brought both tears and laughter. Just as the atmosphere settled, with the air thick with the fragrance of freshly cut flowers, the doorbell rang. I approached the door, my heart fluttering with a mix of anticipation and uncertainty. There, standing among the mourners, was Evelyn, Andrew's estranged mother, holding a bottle of whiskey as some kind of peace offering. She seemed out of place, her desperation for reconciliation palpable. A flood of emotion surged through me, anger, resentment, confusion mingled with a deep ache for closure. Yet, when I looked into Evelyn's tear-streaked face, something in her eyes shifted. Beneath the years of hurt, there was a flicker of understanding. I opened my arms, and she stepped forward, allowing us to embrace. The tears that flowed between us spoke of unspoken sorrows, a moment of connection that began to dissolve years of bitterness. Evelyn's quiet confessions of regret washed over me. Though the wounds she caused would never fully heal, I found in my heart a small spark of compassion. The room was heavy with a complex dance of emotions as friends and family, aware of the history between Evelyn and Andrew, cautiously welcomed her into the fold. Their support for me was clear. They set aside their own reservations to offer her a place at our table. Throughout the gathering, Evelyn shared stories of her own struggles with addiction, offering a glimpse into her pain and her desperate yearning for redemption. What began as a day of grief transformed into an unexpected step toward healing, not just for me, but perhaps for Evelyn as well. As she spoke of the remorse she felt for the harm she'd caused Andrew, I could feel my heart soften. Beneath the layers of disappointment and regret, there still flickered the love of a mother, tarnished, but not extinguished. Her words painted an intimate portrait of the son she had lost along the way, and as the service came to a close and guests began to leave, Evelyn remained behind. My sisters and I quietly tidied up, grateful for her unexpected help. In a quiet, vulnerable moment, she turned to me, her voice trembling with hope and uncertainty. "Sarah," she said, "I know I have no right to ask this, but could I have a chance to say goodbye to my son, maybe through his belongings?" I met her gaze, my heart filled with both curiosity and caution. Still, I wanted to listen. "What is it you'd like to ask?" I replied, encouraging her gently. With a deep breath, Evelyn spoke her request, and in that moment, I recognized the depth of her regret and longing, another step in a journey toward healing, both for her and for me. I paused, contemplating the weight of Evelyn's request. Her eyes searched mine, sensing my hesitation, and she quickly added, "I know it's an unusual ask, and you have every right to say no, but if I could just touch his clothes or smell his cologne, maybe, just maybe, I could feel connected to him again, even though he's gone." Despite the pain and resentment still clinging to my heart, there was something undeniably sincere in her voice, a vulnerability I couldn't ignore. She was grieving in her own way, and her remorse was palpable. I took a deep breath before answering softly, "Evelyn, I see how much you loved Andrew. The regret in your eyes is clear. If this could bring you some comfort, then yes, you may go up to his room and spend time with his things. Take all the time you need." Gratitude flooded Evelyn's expression, and she whispered, "Thank you, Sarah, your kindness means more to me than you can imagine." As she made her way up the stairs, I reflected on the day, on the morning, the unexpected moments of reconciliation, and perhaps, just maybe, a small step toward healing not only for Evelyn but for all of us touched by Andrew's life and legacy. A whirlwind of emotion stirred within me as Evelyn disappeared upstairs. Part of me hoped this act would offer her some form of closure, a way to heal the broken bond between mother and son, but another part of me remained cautious, mindful of how easily these delicate moments of vulnerability could become entangled with the past's unresolved wounds. I found myself contemplating the fragile nature of human relationships. They could be torn apart in an instant, yet they were also capable of great resilience when nurtured through understanding, forgiveness, and time. In that moment, I chose to embrace forgiveness and grace, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I might question this choice in the future. About 25 minutes later, Evelyn returned from the bedroom, her eyes swollen and red from crying. The stoic facade she usually wore had completely melted away, leaving only raw vulnerability in its place. She took a deep breath, her voice shaking as she spoke. "Thank you for allowing me this time with Andrew," she said, her words carrying a weight of genuine gratitude. "I'm truly grateful for your kindness and understanding." Her sincerity tugged at something within me, and I felt a twinge of sympathy. Despite everything, as Evelyn said her final goodbyes, a palpable sense of closure seemed to fill the room. The emotional weight of the day hung in the air like a heavy blanket, but it was also a silent testament to the complex web of feelings we had all navigated together. With heavy hearts, we watched as Evelyn left the house, each of us processing the day's events in our own way. As the hours passed and the evening sun cast a warm golden glow through the windows, my sisters and I found solace in one another's company. We shared memories of Andrew, gentle laughter easing the sorrow, and drew strength from the love that bound us together as a family. As the light outside deepened into dusk, exhaustion began to settle in. One by one, my sisters said their goodbyes, seeking rest after the long, draining day. For the first time that day, the house felt still and quiet, a temporary peace enveloping me as I sat in the comfort of my own thoughts. I found myself alone in the quiet sanctuary of my room, enveloped in the stillness. The silence pressed in, amplifying the weight of Evelyn's earlier request, a private moment with Andrew's belongings. As the room remained silent and unmoving, my mind wandered back over the emotional journey of the day, grappling with the complexities of forgiveness and the paths we choose in our search for peace. Overcome by a deep curiosity and a longing to feel close to Andrew, even in his absence, I found myself drawn to the tangible remnants of his life. With gentle reverence, I began sifting through his belongings, each item an intimate testament to the man he was. I picked up his favorite watch, its rhythmic ticking a soft reminder of the precious moments we had shared. My fingers traced the well-worn spines of his books, imagining the stories that had once whispered to him in the quiet of the evening. Turning to the dresser, I examined the items salvaged from the car wreck, his phone, work bag, second watch, and wallet. But as I scanned the contents, a sinking feeling overtook me. The wallet was missing. Panic surged through me, and desperation crept in as I frantically searched the room. I tore through every drawer, checked every corner, but the wallet seemed to have vanished into thin air. The realization struck me with overwhelming force. The wallet retrieved from the wreckage was now gone. In my distress, I knew I couldn't solve this mystery alone. Perhaps I had been mistaken and it had never been returned to me. With trembling hands, I dialed Gary, a dear friend who had been present at the funeral and had played a key role in retrieving Andrew's belongings. As a trusted member of the police department, Gary had the skills and dedication to help uncover the truth. The phone rang, and with each passing second, my heart pounded harder, tears streaming down my face. When Gary's calm voice answered, I poured out my anguish, explaining the circumstances and the urgency of the situation. With a heavy sigh, Gary confirmed that he had indeed returned Andrew's wallet, along with the other items. Relief mixed with confusion washed over me. If Gary had returned the wallet, then where could it have gone? A chilling realization struck me like a bolt of lightning, illuminating the dark corners of my mind. The wallet could only have been taken by Evelyn, my estranged and manipulative mother-in-law, who must have seized the opportunity to snatch it while I was immersed in my grief, unaware of any ulterior motives. Taking a deep breath, I shared my suspicions with Gary, my voice trembling with a blend of anger, sadness, and disbelief. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Gary reassured me with determination. Andrew was one of my best friends, and I promise you, if Evelyn had anything to do with this, we'll uncover the truth and make sure she faces the consequences. His words were like a warm embrace, sparking a flicker of hope within me. Despite the shadows that loomed and the uncertainty clouding my path, I felt a renewed sense of resolve. Gary was by my side, and together, we would delve into the murky depths of this twisted tale, uncover Evelyn's motives, and bring closure to this painful chapter of our lives. As the days passed, the weight of grief still pressed heavily upon me, but I was jolted by yet another disturbing revelation. A steady stream of bank statements sent to both my and Andrew's phones revealed troubling patterns of transactions. It started with smaller amounts, $1, $600 here, $3,000 there, but quickly escalated into a torrential flood of deductions, with sums exceeding $5,000 draining from Andrew's hard-earned savings. Fear and concern gripped my heart as I watched the relentless siphoning of his funds. It felt like a violation, a desecration of his memory that cut me to the core. With a heavy heart, I reached out to Gary again, seeking his guidance and solace in the face of this new ordeal. His voice, filled with empathy and resolve, filled the line. You need to get Andrew's cards deactivated immediately to stop these unauthorized transactions, he advised. His words were practical, urgent, but following them meant facing a harsh reality, canceling credit and debit cards, terminating subscriptions, severing financial ties. Each action was a stark reminder that Andrew was truly gone. As the anger built within me, fueled by Evelyn's audacious actions, a rebellious thought took root. How dare she squander my late husband's money with such reckless abandon? No, I resolved, I would not succumb to her wicked game so easily. I was resolved to face this challenge head-on, to protect Andrew's legacy and defend his memory from those who sought to exploit it. As I continued to deal with the turmoil Evelyn brought into our lives, a plan began to form in my mind. I decided to let her continue using the cards, giving her the false sense of security that she was getting away with it while I quietly held the power. I would gather evidence, watch her every move, and wait for the right moment to expose her deceit and reclaim what was rightfully Andrew's. This decision wasn't made lightly. It meant enduring the harsh reality of his absence for a little longer, but my resolve was unwavering. I was determined to bring Evelyn's true nature to light and show the world what she had done. I would document every transaction she made, keeping track of every dollar she spent until the moment arrived for confrontation. It was a delicate dance, letting her revel in her perceived control while I prepared to dismantle her carefully built facade. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. Despair would hit me in waves, but each time, determination would pull me back. The loving memories of Andrew kept me strong. I wasn't going to let Evelyn tarnish his legacy. When the time came, I would confront her, and it would be unforgettable. As the weeks passed, Evelyn's actions became even more brazen. The money she continued to drain from Andrew's accounts was staggering, and each new transaction only deepened my disgust. How could she be so shameless? How could she betray her own son's memory in such a way? Every time I saw a new charge, my anger grew, but I knew I had to wait for the right moment. Then, one day, as I opened the door to my house, there she stood, Evelyn, her face twisted in a feigned expression of remorse, but I wasn't fooled. "Hello, Sarah," she said, her voice tentative. "No, you may not come in," I replied firmly, blocking the doorway. I wasn't about to let her manipulate me any longer. I imagined as much, she said with a resigned tone, her words laced with deceit. I stood my ground, prepared to protect what remained of Andrew's life from her manipulations. Evelyn then spoke, her voice soft with what appeared to be guilt. I imagine you've noticed that Andrew's wallet is missing. I'm so sorry, Sarah. In my grief, I took it. I thought my time to say goodbye would be brief, so I took it as a keepsake. Really? I thought, struggling to conceal my disbelief. Really? I echoed aloud. Yes, she admitted, her voice faltering. It was wrong of me, but I've come to my senses. I'm going to return it. Anger surged inside me, but I kept my composure. This was my chance to finally reveal the full extent of her lies. I handed her a document, a detailed record of every penny she had stolen from Andrew, along with a breakdown of the legal charges she would now face. Her hand shook as she read it, and her eyes widened in fear and confusion. What's this? She stammered. It's a record of the money you've stolen from Andrew. It also outlines the legal consequences you now face, I said, my voice steady. In an instant, her facade crumbled. She sank to the front porch, overwhelmed by the weight of her actions. Without hesitation, I called for an ambulance. When Evelyn regained consciousness in the sterile environment of a hospital room, handcuffed and facing the reality of her crimes, the truth hit her with full force. She screamed, demanding to be released, but I remained calm. I had no intention of letting her escape the consequences of what she had done. With the help of Gary, my trusted friend in law enforcement, I had gathered enough evidence to ensure that Evelyn would face the full weight of the law. We had calculated the likely amount of time she would spend behind bars, a fitting punishment for her despicable actions. Reflecting on the journey that had brought me here, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Justice was being served, but the road to this point had been fraught with pain and betrayal. Through it all, I had found a strength I never knew I had, fueled by the love and memories of Andrew. The thought that I had honored his memory by exposing Evelyn's treachery brought peace to my heart. Andrew's legacy had been safeguarded, and Evelyn would now face the consequences of her fraudulent actions. With this chapter closed, I could finally begin to move forward, free from the shadow of her deceit. It was a bittersweet victory. Andrew was gone, but his spirit could now rest, knowing that justice had prevailed. This journey had been painful, but it was also a reminder that no act of deceit goes unchecked, and that love, determination, and integrity can triumph even in the darkest of times. The truth had found its way to light, and with it, I had reclaimed my peace.
Hey, I'm Kenneth, but everyone calls me Ken. I just turned 33, and let me tell you, I've got quite a story to share. Before today's events, I didn't really believe in karma or anything spiritual. I thought it was all just in people's heads. But now, I've had a change of heart. I totally believe that what goes around comes around. And it's all because of my mean mother-in-law and her family. Well, except for my amazing wife, she's the exception. Despite growing up around all that negativity, she's still a wonderful person. Now let me tell you about the crazy stuff that happened on a sunny Wednesday morning in my house. Hey, could you come down here real quick? What's up, honey? I need to ask you something, and please don't say no. My wife gave me those adorable puppy dog eyes, and honestly, who could resist that? She explained how her mom, Georgina, was coming to town and needed a place to stay. I knew what she was getting at, and I quickly said no. But babe, it's just for the weekend. Can't you handle having a sweet old lady around for a couple of days? Let me tell you, that lady was anything but sweet. She was like pure evil, I kid you not. Dealing with her was like living in a horror movie. I often wonder how my wife turned out so kind despite having such a nightmare for a mother. As I started explaining why I couldn't handle having Georgina around and suggested she stay in a hotel, Kimberly started looking really sad. And like I said, I can't resist her sad face. She's got me wrapped around her finger. So reluctantly, I agreed. Kimberly was over the moon, thanking me like crazy. Since you're being so good about this, I'll make sure she behaves too. Don't worry. Hopefully you won't even have to see each other. It'll all be smooth sailing, I promise. Well, that promise didn't last long because what happened next was totally unexpected. It was Friday afternoon, and Georgina, my mother-in-law, was about to arrive. We prepared the guest room with everything she might need and some stuff she likes, hoping it would keep her from causing drama. Around noon, the doorbell rang. Kimberly, busy in the kitchen, called out, "I think she's here, Kenny. Can you get the door, please?" I prepared myself and opened the door. Standing there was a woman with a not-so-friendly expression. It wasn't a smile, it looked more like a scowl. My mother-in-law, I greeted her. "Hello, Kenneth. Hi there. How was your trip? Are you doing okay?" I welcomed her inside, taking her stuff and doing all the host stuff without being too pushy. But I could feel my irritation building as she started her never-ending complaints. "Wow, Kenneth, the patio looks amazing. Did you do this?" "Yeah, it looks absolutely lovely. I'll need to snap some photos soon." "Oh, could you take those bags upstairs to my room, dear? And could you also make me a coffee? I'd like a caramel macchiato with whipped cream, please." Did she think this was a Starbucks? If you've ever seen A Streetcar Named Desire, you might get an idea of what Georgina was like. She acted just like Blanche, all high and mighty with a touch of fake innocence. She strutted around like she was a gift to the world. I can't stand that kind of arrogance, especially when she's being rude. Just then, Kimberly came out of the kitchen to greet her mom. "You look stunning." "Oh, come on, Kimberly, do I? You're just saying that." "Well, you do look great. It's this new diet I'm on. You should try it. You could use it, sweetheart." "But not this weekend. This weekend is for relaxing. That's why I ordered my caramel macchiato." Speaking of which, Kenneth, when's my coffee going to be ready? I'm thirsty. I need something to drink right now. I might faint. See what I have to deal with. After enjoying a delicious lunch prepared by my wonderful wife, I had to quickly Google how to make a caramel macchiato. Georgina made it her mission to point out every little flaw in the meal, followed by a quick, "It's fine. Don't worry too much" to soften the blow. But she made sure to remind us to be extra careful next time to avoid making those silly mistakes, as she called them. She seemed to enjoy talking down to us, and while I could handle it, I could see it was getting to Kimberly. I mean, how could she not be bothered? That was her mom, after all, and Kimberly didn't have a mean bone in her body. I couldn't say the same for myself, though. I'm the type who likes to get revenge when I can. Later in the afternoon, Georgina went on and on about how much she loved the house. Well, she had a unique way of expressing her love for it. Sure, my time in Bora Bora was nice, but Zanzibar was even better. The scenery was stunning and the people were lovely. This vacation won't be as fancy as those, but it's still a vacation. Maybe it'll humble me a bit, since I've been to so many fancy places. It'll be a nice change of pace, I guess. I'll be honest, I zoned out of the conversation many times, and whenever I checked back in, it was still going on. Georgina had a way of making things drag on longer than they needed to. Anyway, we spent the afternoon chatting, mostly Kimberly and Georgina. I was just there, like a decoration, making sure Kimberly was comfortable. Every now and then, I'd chime in to make it seem like I was paying attention. Around 4 p.m. that evening, things started to get a bit weird. "You know, Kimberly, I've been complimenting your house ever since I got here, and I have to say, it's stunning." "Thanks, Mom. We've been working hard to make it nice, and Kenny and I spent a lot of time getting ready for your visit. It's so good that I can't keep this beauty to myself." "What do you mean, Mom? What are you saying?" "Well, you know, on my trips to places like Cancun, Fiji, or India, I always bring along some friends or family. I don't like traveling alone, especially as I'm getting older. It's become a bit of a tradition for me to have companions like Ursula or Justine." "Oh, that sounds nice. How are they? It's been a while since we talked." "Funny you ask, because they're actually on their way here now. You can catch up with them yourself." Kimberly nearly chokes on her coffee at this unexpected news. I would have done a spit take too if I had anything in my mouth, because I was shocked at what she just said. But I kept my cool and managed to say, Kim, let's go to the kitchen, now." We headed to the kitchen to talk about this bombshell. "Please tell me she's joking, babe." "I don't think she's joking, but you only told me she was coming. We only prepped for one person." "I'm just as surprised as you are, babe. I didn't know anything until now, just like you." I started pacing in the kitchen. "So what do we do? I guess we'll have to tell her we only prepped for one person, and maybe we can put the girls up in a hotel. They can come over during the day to hang out with Mom." I sighed in frustration. This was also inconvenient, wasn't it? Note the sarcasm. As much as I cared about Ursula and Justine, my aunt-in-law and sister-in-law, I wasn't keen on entertaining them all weekend. They were a bit like their mother, not as bad, but having them all around would be chaotic. We argued about it until Georgina herself showed up in the kitchen. What's the problem? I think it's a nice idea to have other family members join us for the weekend. She started pouting, and strangely, it had the same effect on Kimberly as Kimberly's pouting had on me. When she wanted to, Georgina could get her way with those puppy dog eyes. I guess Kimberly inherited that skill from her mom. Oh no, Mom, please don't be upset. It was a nice thought, but we just can't handle this sudden change, especially on such short notice. Kenny and I were thinking of putting Ursula and Justine up in a nearby hotel, and they can come over during the day. Angeline is also coming with them. So you want 4 extra people in the house? I'm sorry, Georgina, but that's not going to work. Oh, Kenny dear, don't be such a stick in the mud. Jolene has to come. She hasn't been part of the tradition, and she really wants to join in. Plus, she's your younger sister-in-law. We have to make room for her. And honestly, you're not even considered part of our real family, so it makes sense for you to leave and for the girls to stay. It's just for a couple of days after all. Mom, how can you say that? Kenny is our real family. Is he though? You're putting him above your actual sisters. That's not what I meant, Mom. The main issue is space. We're worried there won't be enough room for everyone. I'm glad you brought that up because I've come up with a solution that will please everyone. Okay, let's hear it. Okay, so here's my idea. Ursula and I can share the bed in the guest room since it's big enough, and Jolene can sleep in Kimberly's bed. There was silence. I was completely lost. I looked at my wife, and she seemed just as confused. Finally, I asked, so you want 3 people to sleep in one bed? That's uncomfortable and inappropriate, don't you think? Yeah, Mom, we're adults now. It's not appropriate for me, my husband, and my sister to share a bed. Aha, I knew you'd say that, which is why I think it's best if Kenneth doesn't stay here during this time. Again, silence. At that moment, I think she finally lost it. So you want me to leave my own house? Kenny dear, don't call me that. Kenneth, don't talk to me like that. Kimberly, are you going to let him speak to me like that? Look, I don't appreciate you coming into my house and making last-minute demands. It's not fair. If you wanted a girls' trip, that would have been fine if you planned it in advance. Why didn't you just tell us what you wanted? And saying I'm not your real family was rude. I didn't think you'd get so upset now. Honestly, you're acting childish, and don't you think, Kim? I don't know what to say, Mom. I don't think it's fair. Oh, you young people and your sensitivity. I didn't do this on purpose. It must have just slipped my mind. I'm sure you understand. I didn't quite understand, but when I looked at my wife, she was silently pleading with me. I caved in, feeling frustrated, and said, Georgina, better communication would have been appreciated. As I said earlier, I wouldn't have minded if you ladies wanted a girls' trip for the weekend. I could have gone on a trip with the guys or worked at the orphanage. But springing this on us isn't fair. We're adults, even if you see us as your kids. You're a guest in our home, and you need to respect that. I stayed calm and politely pointed out her mistake. She scoffed, walked around, and even laughed at times, seemingly trying to avoid the embarrassment of being confronted by her sister-in-law. Nevertheless, I stood my ground. You want to have a girls' trip and have everyone here for the weekend. Fine, you want me out of the house? That's fine too, but I'll be back after the weekend. With that, I kissed my wife on the cheek and headed to our room. Kimberly tried to reason with her mother, telling her that what she did wasn't okay and that she seriously upset me. But Georgina just laughed it off, treating me like I was overreacting. I packed some clothes in a duffel bag and left. I booked a hotel room online and headed there, but not before stopping by the orphanage where I regularly volunteered. As I mentioned before, the orphanage is called Open Arms, and I love working there. But dealing with unruly and disobedient toddlers, children, and teenagers is no easy task. As I spent the evening playing and helping out the children, I couldn't shake off the thought of how to get back at Georgina. I'm not evil, or at least I don't think I am. But I do believe in teaching people a lesson when they deserve it. I guess that's why I'm good at my job. I had a good connection with the kids, showing them both love and discipline so they wouldn't take advantage of me. We got along well, to the point where some of them could tell something was bothering me. "Ken, is everything okay?" one of them asked. "Yeah, everything's fine," I said, apologizing for losing my cool. I explained the situation to him in simple terms. He was just a kid, after all. But surprisingly, he understood and even sympathized with me. "With all due respect, Ken, your mother-in-law is crazy." "Tell me about it," I replied. "You've got to get back at her somehow, just to teach her a lesson, right?" "But how?" We thought about it for a while, but I couldn't come up with anything. Then Maverick said something that changed everything. "We could help." "What do you mean?" "We could help. If you take a handful of us kids and bring us to your house, we could ruin her weekend." I thought about it, and then it clicked. Maverick, true to his name, was an evil genius. It was a perfect plan. The kids would get a fun weekend away, and I could get back at my mother-in-law for disrespecting me. We made plans like two evil geniuses plotting world domination and waited until the next day to put our revenge into action. The next day, Saturday, went like this. Kimberly answered the doorbell and was surprised to see Maverick and a few other kids. "Why, hello, Kimberly, Kenny." "Oh, Maverick, hello, how are you?" Then she noticed the other kids and looked confused. "What's going on, babe?" "Oh, nothing. I thought I'd bring the kids along to join in Georgina's lovely vacation," I said as I walked into the room, followed by 5 kids aged 6 to 10. They were known as the rowdiest bunch, but they could be sweet when they wanted to be. It was when they felt disrespected that they'd let loose. I promised them ice cream if they caused chaos. "Hello, Kenneth, how are you?" "Oh, who are these lovely children?" "Good morning, Georgina. I hope you're all well. I see the rest of the gang made it." "Hey, Kenneth, how are you?" "I'm well, thank you." "Who are these kids?" "Oh, these children. They're from the orphanage." "Yes, we can see that. But why are they here?" "Good question. Maverick, would you like to answer that?" "Well, Ken told us about the lovely vacation you were having in his home. And we've never been on a vacation, so he invited us over to join in." The in-laws, who were sipping mimosas and eating croissants in the living area, gasped in horror and shared looks of disbelief. Some of the kids started grabbing food from the table: bacon, pancakes, orange juice, causing chaos. Georgina stood up and pulled me aside. "What's the meaning of this?" "Just as Maverick said, I wanted the kids to have their own little vacation. I'm sure you wouldn't mind. How can you bring all these kids into the house? This is too much, and someone named Maverick is bound to cause trouble. This was supposed to be a relaxing weekend for me and the girls, you know this." "Oh well, I'm sure you wouldn't mind. It's only for a couple of days after all." "Listen, I know you're upset." "No, you listen here, Georgina. I'm tired of you acting like you own the place. If you want to stay here for a vacation, that's fine, but the kids are staying too. They deserve to enjoy just as much as you do. So maybe next time you'll remember it's not nice to inconvenience others." And with that, I didn't give her a chance to respond. I walked back into the living room to see the chaos unfold. "The little girl, don't you dare touch that. That's an expensive designer bag. Stop it. You little troublemakers are causing chaos. Is this what vacations are normally like? Because if so, count me out." The ladies were being harassed by the unruly children, causing chaos. You might wonder how Kimberly felt. She was in the corner snickering. She found it funny too. You might also wonder how I felt watching my house get torn apart. It was worth it to see the looks on my in-laws' faces. I didn't mind cleaning up. Maverick promised they'd help. I just wanted to witness the chaos as the prim older ladies dealt with the chaotic children. Well, everything seems in order. I'll be on my way. I'll pick up the kids tomorrow or Monday. Cheerio. And with that, I left, laughing in my hotel room. I called Kimberly and told her the kids weren't meant to bother her, just the snobby ladies. If she needed a break, she could stay with me. That day was one of the best of my life.
Hi, I'm Claire, and I'm 34 years old. Let me tell you about the time I decided to get back at my mean mother-in-law who was determined to make my life miserable. I tried to be patient and ignore her behavior for a while, but eventually I couldn't take it anymore. Let me explain a bit. Whenever my mother-in-law gave me something, it was never very good. Like on our wedding day. This present is from my mother-in-law, Justine. Let's see what's inside. It's a used spatula. Well, thank you. And on my 31st birthday, Justine, you really shouldn't have. What's inside? Oh, it's, what exactly is it? It's a shovel, dear. Ah, how nice. But it looks a bit old. It's a fixed-up shovel. I later discovered she took it from the neighbor's shed and gave it to me. Another time, when I hosted a dinner party, she brought the cheapest bottle of wine she could find. At that point, I wished she wouldn't bother doing anything for me at all. But what really bothered me were the times she insisted on cooking for me, only for the food to taste awful every single time. At first, I was understanding. Not everyone is a great cook, and that's okay. I thought it was the thought that counted, not necessarily the taste. But then I learned that the same dishes she made for me tasted amazing when she cooked for other people. After trying to convince myself otherwise for a while, I realized she was intentionally making my food taste bad. Claire, try my casserole. I made it. I'm really full from all the food you've given me. Please, just take a bite for me. I reluctantly took a bite, feeling uneasy about what might happen next. As expected, the casserole tasted terrible. It made me wonder if she was trying to harm me with it. You might be wondering what my husband thought about all of this. Well, he didn't believe me. I didn't blame him. It's tough to accept such a strange idea, especially when it's about your own mother. But I kept asking him to try the food she made for me, hoping he'd see what I meant. Every time, he dismissed me, saying I was imagining things. Sometimes he'd almost try it, but Justine always stopped him. Hey, that food is for Claire. I made it just for her, considering her dietary needs. Yes, I have specific dietary needs because I'm a vegetarian, but I married into a family that loves their meat. So whenever there's a big family meal, my mother-in-law, Justine, would make a separate dish for me, which I appreciated. But it always seemed like she didn't put much effort into it. After realizing she was messing with my food, I tried to understand her. Maybe she was upset about having to make a special dish for me. But that didn't explain why she gave me terrible gifts all the time. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt until a few months ago. I invited a coworker who's also a vegetarian to a family cookout. Justine made 2 vegetarian dishes, one for my coworker and one for me. I tasted my coworker's dish secretly, and it was delicious, but mine was awful. It was clear that Justine could cook well. When I told my husband Liam about it, he just brushed it off. Oh, come on, Claire, you're overreacting and being a bit rude. I'm telling you, she's intentionally messing with my food. She doesn't want to make good food for me. Even if the food isn't great, which I doubt, what do you expect from her? She's just one person. Maybe you could help her out in the kitchen, especially with vegetarian dishes. I've offered to help many times, but she gets defensive and thinks I don't like her cooking, which you don't. And when I suggest things, she gets upset. There's no pleasing her. Maybe you should bring your own food to gatherings then, even if it seems rude. It's not like you have a serious allergy. You're just a vegetarian, and everyone can make vegetarian food. But remember Lucy, your coworker? She was nice. Yeah, Lucy's food was great, even the vegetarian dishes. They both took a moment to think about everything. Liam sat down on the bed, thinking deeply. Well, say something, Claire urged. Look, you're my wife, and I love you. I want to trust you, but I think you might be imagining things. I understand that my mom can be odd with gifts, but sabotaging your food, that's really messed up and dangerous, isn't it? Exactly. One time, I swear I smelled bleach in my food. I had to make an excuse to go to the bathroom so I wouldn't have to eat it. Claire, maybe because you and my mom don't get along, you're seeing her differently than the rest of us. She's a fantastic cook. I agree. After trying Lucy's food tonight, I'm sure she can cook well, but for some reason, she doesn't put in the effort with me. Enough. I won't let you talk badly about my mom anymore. She's a great cook. You're imagining things. I was frustrated. How many times did I have to convince him I was telling the truth? I decided to prove it. I waited for the next family gathering to make my move. About a month later, my mother-in-law called. "I'm good, thank you. How about you?" "Oh, I'm excited. We're having another family gathering this weekend to celebrate Uncle JJ's return from France. Can you and Liam make it?" "Of course, Justine. We wouldn't miss it." "Oh, that's great. Uncle JJ prefers simple things, even though he's from France. So we're keeping it casual with sliders and sandwiches. You can even bring your coworker friend again. She was lovely." "Unfortunately, she can't make it this time, but Liam and I will be there." "Oh, that's too bad. But I'm glad you both can come. Oh, one more thing before I forget. I've decided to get you some special plates to make it easier to separate vegetarian and non-vegetarian dishes. They're beautiful navy blue plates." "No problem, Justine. Thank you. Okay, see you soon." After hanging up, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. Normally, different plates wouldn't bother me, but knowing what I knew about her, I realized it was just another way for her to make me feel isolated from everyone else. Everyone else in the family always enjoys their meals, but mine are always terrible. So when I complain, I look picky and fussy. But that's not true. There are rumors going around that I'm just being difficult, and I wish I could prove them wrong by sharing my food. But Justine always stops me and gets upset if I don't eat what she made. Sometimes I manage to avoid eating it, but usually I have to force it down quickly to avoid tasting it. Whenever I visit, I dread it and can't wait to leave and make my own food. But this weekend was different. I was excited because I had a plan to show everyone that I wasn't making things up. I had real concerns and everyone needed to see that. The weekend came and Liam and I brought our coleslaw to the barbecue. There was so much meat everywhere. Even the meat lovers thought it was too much. Despite my initial worries, the party was going well. I was enjoying chatting with my in-laws and playing with my nieces and nephews. But when Justine called us to the dining table, my stomach churned with dread. I forced myself to smile and sit next to Liam. "You see, Claire, everyone's having fun. Why can't you relax? Mom put a lot of effort into this. Maybe if you had a better attitude, you'd enjoy the food." I was tired of Liam's lectures. He had no idea what it was like dealing with his mom's awful cooking, but I had a plan. Justine brought out the food, and my plate, as promised, was navy blue. It stood out among the white plates on the table, but I didn't care. I was ready for my revenge. As everyone sat down to eat and grace was said, I suddenly exclaimed, "Oh my goodness, is that a snake?" People were startled and chaos ensued. The kids got excited and wanted to see the snake, while the adults sprang into action, with the women leading the children inside and the men cautiously checking out where I pointed. While everyone was distracted, I followed behind the women, glancing back at the dinner table. Luckily, all the food looked similar, so it was hard to tell which plate was which. That's why my mother-in-law made a special plate for me, so she could tell which one had the bad food. As people started to come back from checking for the snake, I quickly swapped the sandwiches from my plate and Liam's. Just as Justine was coming back outside, Liam told her it was a false alarm and the snake was gone. As everyone returned to their seats, there was a sense of excitement in the air, despite the false alarm. People enjoyed the rush of adrenaline, even the elders. They settled back into their seats, and I apologized, saying, "Sorry, everyone. I must have misjudged the ground. Please excuse the disturbance." Everyone took it well, not too bothered by the interruption. "No problem, dear. It's better to be safe than sorry," someone replied, and everyone seemed to enjoy the little thrill of the snake scare. The mood shifted when Liam took a bite of what he thought was his sandwich, but it turned out to be my vegetarian one. "It's wild," he said before biting into it. Suddenly, he stopped and everyone's attention turned to him. He gagged and spat out the sandwich. "Ew, this is awful." "Liam, that's so rude," Justine scolded him. "I put so much effort into these dishes," Justine protested as everyone began to eat their food, enjoying the delicious flavors. They started questioning Liam about his reaction. Even Uncle JJ, who usually stayed quiet, said it tasted fine to him. I don't know, guys. The food just tasted weird to me for a moment. Sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to be rude. Maybe it's a new recipe. Let me try again. Liam attempted to take another bite, but he started gagging before it reached his mouth. Justine was getting flustered and complained about Liam's rudeness. Mom, I'm sorry, but I can't eat this. There's something wrong with it. Except it's not, I added, and everyone looked at me, surprised by my statement. It was then that Liam noticed I hadn't touched my food. Babe, why aren't you eating? Because it has meat in it, I admitted. The table fell silent, and I saw understanding dawn in Liam's eyes. Mom, have you been messing with Claire's food? Everyone exclaimed, shocked. Justine started shouting in response. Liam, I don't know what's gotten into you. Maybe it's your spoiled wife who convinced you, but I won't stand for this. Apologize now. No, Mom, it's your food that's spoiled. Claire was right, Liam declared. He handed his sandwich to Uncle JJ, who almost threw up after trying to take a bite. Justine's eyes turned to me, filled with venom. What have you done? She hissed. I should be asking you the same thing. You've been sabotaging my meals every time I come here, making me miserable. I confessed to everyone. I'm sorry for lying about the snake, but I needed a distraction. Justine has been poisoning my food since I joined this family. Everyone gasped in shock. It's true. I suspected it for a while, and I know I might have seemed picky, but try Justine's sandwich if you can stomach it, I urged. The sandwich made its way around the table, eliciting gagging and dry heaving from those who tried it. They advised the elderly and children not to eat it, and one person even considered going to the hospital due to the smell. Your move, Justine, I challenged. Okay, you got me. I was sabotaging your food, Justine confessed. Why would you do that? Because she hates me. She's always had it out for me since day one, Justine shouted. Liam suddenly looked ill. He vomited all over the grass and collapsed onto the patio sofa. Mom, what did you put in that sandwich? Liam asked weakly. Liam, Oh God, are you okay? That sandwich wasn't meant for you. I'm so sorry, everyone. Please forgive me, Justine exclaimed in panic. Uncle JJ's homecoming had to be cut short, and several family members rushed Liam to the hospital. It turned out that the sandwich contained rancid mushrooms with traces of cat feces, causing severe food poisoning. Liam was hospitalized for some time as he recovered, and my mother-in-law was arrested after confessing to her actions. The incident made me realize the extent of her hatred towards me. She was willing to harm me just because she despised me. If it had been me, she might have delayed getting help. But because it was her son, she rushed to fix her mistake. However, it was too late. Thankfully, Liam recovered fully. During his hospital stay, he repeatedly apologized for not believing me about his mother's actions. His mother attempted to post bail, but the other family members refused, insisting she needed to reflect on her actions. Visitors informed me of her remorse and realization of her mistakes after seeing her son suffer. However, I couldn't accept her apology. It took seeing her son in pain for her to acknowledge her wrongdoing. For years, she never considered the harm she was causing. Who knows what else she put in my food? I endured it in silence, often getting sick and missing work to recover. After sharing this with my husband, he felt even more sympathetic towards me and promised to always believe me. I'm relieved I could impart 2 lessons. Always trust your spouse and don't mess with me, or you might end up in jail.
Why are you getting in my way? Since I said I'm going to live here, I'll take everything unnecessary outside and quickly bring in my stuff. My mother-in-law announced loudly outside the store I manage. My husband Sean, who was standing next to her, just laughed. At that moment, a black car pulled up. My name is Shelley, and I'm 31 years old. Sean and I got married 4 years ago. His father passed away when Sean was young, so his mother raised him alone. Sean graduated from university and got a job at a local manufacturing company. He's kind-hearted and soft-spoken, but he's easily influenced by others, which makes it hard for him to advance in his career. I also graduated from university and initially worked at a cosmetics company, but I never gave up on my dream of becoming an esthetician. While working, I attended beauty school at night and trained at a top esthetician shop. I pursued this dream because I was always self-conscious about the shape of my face. I had received hurtful comments about it since I was young. However, in high school, while walking with friends, I got a free trial coupon for an aesthetic treatment and decided to try it that day. The shop was white and clean, with a comforting scent, and a very beautiful esthetician took care of me. I was immediately drawn to the charm of the place. She listened to my concerns and gave me a genuine treatment, even though it was free. I'll never forget the surprise I felt when I looked in the mirror afterward. She said, "It's our job to solve problems and bring out people's confidence." Her words moved me, and I felt tears well up. This experience made me want to help others, leading me to choose this profession. Sean and I met through a friend's introduction, and after several dates, we grew closer and got married after about 2 years of dating. Sean is gentle but not very assertive, which balanced well with my strong personality, at least until his mother came into the picture. When we talked about getting married, his mother repeatedly asked us to live with her at her home in the suburbs, which was inconvenient for commuting. We managed to convince her otherwise and started our married life alone. Then a year ago, I quit my job and opened my own aesthetic salon, a dream I had for many years. Although I used to juggle part-time jobs, starting my own business made me much busier than before, leading to more frequent disagreements in the life Sean and I shared. Still, we made efforts to maintain our bond as a couple by having breakfast together and letting each other know when we would be home. One evening, as I returned home late, Sean, who would usually be asleep by then, was waiting for me with a serious expression. "Shelley, there's something my mother told me," he began. He revealed that his mother had accumulated debts, and it had reached the point where she had to sell the family home. I was shocked. His mother had always been reckless with money and lived without a plan. He further explained that his mother had used the money his father had saved for Sean's tuition, forcing Sean to rely on scholarships for university. This behavior was why I had refused to live with her when we were newly married. The sale of her house meant she would have nowhere to live, which made me feel uneasy. "Can we let my mother live with us?" Sean asked, but I quickly cut him off. "It's impossible. We absolutely cannot live together. I don't mean to speak ill of your mother, but she would end up dipping into our living expenses. Isn't your mother still working? She should rent an apartment with her income and live alone." I strongly appealed to Sean, desperately wanting to avoid living together. It hurt to criticize his mother, but it was necessary. "No, actually, there are debts that can't be covered even by selling the family home, so I suggested cutting expenses to allocate more towards debt repayment," Sean replied. "You can't just decide that," I responded. "I understand what you're saying, Shelley. I take back what I said earlier, and I'll talk to her about living on her own," he said, but I was skeptical. Sean always seems to accept my opinion when he's with me, but he becomes speechless in front of his mother. I was deeply anxious that his mother might eventually force us into living together. Sure enough, the next day, I got a call from Sean's mother. "Shelley, this is terrible. Do you really hate the idea of living with me that much? I held back when you two first got married, thinking you were newlyweds, but this time it's unavoidable. I'm about to lose my home. Even if we're not blood-related, what kind of cruel daughter-in-law are you to abandon a mother?" My mother-in-law harshly criticized me. "I'm sorry, but I have to oppose this. Our house is too small for even the two of us, so we can't provide another room." I calmly explained to her, but my calmness only made her angrier. "It's unacceptable for a wife to go against her husband's words. I will retrain you to be a proper wife, so be prepared," she said and abruptly hung up the phone. This was another reason I refused to live together. I've always struggled with her domineering personality. It's frustrating how Sean gets swept up in her assertiveness and becomes submissive. The next day, even though it was early morning, my mother-in-law showed up at our house. "Sean, Shelley, are you there? I've come to talk, so open up quickly," she called out loudly without using the intercom and banged on the door. Worried about disturbing the neighbors, I quickly let her inside, but she ignored me and went straight to wake Sean, who was still asleep. I have to move out of that house by next week. Don't worry about what this daughter-in-law says, quickly start preparing for my sake, she said, hitting Sean on the back. I wonder how a man over 30 could be treated like this by his mother, but I couldn't just stand by and watch. Mother, please calm down a bit. I intervened, to which she directed a sharp glare at me. How can I calm down? This situation is your fault. It's because of your selfishness, she snapped. Tension filled the air between us. Sean, seeing this, said, Mom, I'm sorry. I'll figure something out, just wait a little longer, and suddenly began to apologize earnestly. Seeing him like this left me dumbfounded. However, my mother-in-law seemed somewhat satisfied with his response. You have 1 more week. Make sure you sort it out by then, she said, and then left. Sean, why do you act so helplessly, and what exactly do you plan to do? I asked as I pressed him. Sean visibly became angry. Be quiet, Shelley. Can't you show a bit more understanding? Why am I always the one being blamed? He shouted and then covered his head with a blanket. Sean raising his voice was unheard of, and I began to feel anxious that something unusual might happen this time. My premonition was right. The situation worsened the next week. As set by my mother-in-law, she and Sean took an unexpected action. That day, I visited the bank in the morning for work and planned to head to the store in the afternoon. The store opens in the afternoon, so I had left the preparations to my staff. However, before opening, I received a call from my staff telling me there was a serious issue at the store and that I needed to come quickly. I changed my plans and hurried to the store. To my surprise, when I arrived, my mother-in-law and Sean were confidently walking around inside. What are you doing? Customers will be arriving soon, so please leave, I said. There were several beds in the store, separated by partitions, but my mother-in-law was lying on the beds and measuring them. What are you talking about? This is a viewing, isn't it? There are beds here and this room is perfect for me. I don't need all of it, but I will use at least half. It's equipped for privacy, and it's discreet, so no worries. But this bed is a bit small. I'll use 2 of them, she said while arranging 2 beds together by herself. Incredibly, Sean was smiling and agreeing with her plan. Sean, what is this? Moving here is not something I can allow. If this is a joke, stop it right now, I appealed, but I was confused by the unexpected actions of my mother-in-law and Sean. If it becomes public that someone is actually living in the esthetician store, it could damage its reputation. My store has been highly rated for its emphasis on hygiene, and many customers have supported us because of this. However, I couldn't let their selfish actions ruin the store's reputation. Please stop this and leave. We're about to open, and we have many reservations. If you stay here, I'll call the police. I shouted. Hearing the word police, my mother-in-law and Sean looked a bit worried. Let's leave it for today, but I'm definitely planning to live here, she said as she left with Sean. I apologized to my staff and quickly tidied up the store. I expected my mother-in-law to be unreasonable, but I was shocked that Sean went along with it. From the look on his face, it was clear he had decided to side with his mother. That night, Sean didn't come home. I wondered if he was avoiding me or if he just didn't care anymore. Still, I needed to make sure something like this didn't happen again, so I called Sean. Hello, Sean? Hello. Sean sounded reluctant to talk. Please tell me your mother's actions today were a joke. If she starts living in the store, it will be ruined instantly. You know this store depends on customer trust. If your mother tries anything strange again, you must stop her. Do you understand? Sean didn't respond and hung up. Seeing his reaction, I realized something. Sean couldn't resist his mother's constant pressure and had chosen to stand by her. It seemed easier for him to give in to his mother than to stand up for us. But this meant my store was in real danger. I was deeply troubled. How could I protect the store I love? I spent the night worrying, and before I knew it, it was morning. The next day was a day off for my salon, but I had a bad feeling, so I went to the store. While I was cleaning, a large truck suddenly stopped in front of the store. I rushed outside to see movers starting to unload furniture and prepare to bring it inside. When I asked the workers, they confirmed that my mother-in-law had requested this, and they were trying to bring her furniture into the store. Please wait, I cannot accept this here, I firmly protested, but the workers didn't stop. They were just doing their job and had to complete the work they were hired to do. I managed to convince the workers to pause temporarily and quickly called for help. The workers were confused by the interruption and seemed to be contacting my mother-in-law. It looked like she and Sean would be arriving soon. Eventually, my mother-in-law and Sean showed up. "Why are you getting in my way? Since I said I'm going to live here, I'll take everything unnecessary outside and quickly bring in my stuff," my mother-in-law ordered. "That's right, Mom is going to live here starting today," Sean added with a chuckle. Even though they were confused, the workers began following her orders to move things outside. "Stop doing as you please," I shouted. Just then, a black luxury car stopped behind the truck. A large man in a double-striped suit and a stylish hat stepped out of the car. His commanding presence was immediately noticeable. He was clearly no ordinary person. The man approached with a deep voice. "What's all this commotion? Isn't this disturbing the neighborhood? Shelley, are you having some trouble?" "Yes, I am. These people are trying to take over my shop and live here," I responded. Hearing this, the man looked towards my mother-in-law and Sean and calmly asked, "It seems there is some sort of trouble here. Is there a reason for this?" Overwhelmed by the man's presence, my mother-in-law hesitated. "What are you talking about? Don't meddle in family matters. This woman is my daughter-in-law, so what's the problem with moving into her house?" At that moment, the man gently removed his hat and said, "I see, that's what this is about. My daughter has always been well taken care of by you. I hear about it often. Sean, it's been a long time," he said with a warm smile. "Father-in-law?" Sean stepped back in surprise. This man was, in fact, my father. His appearance was far from ordinary, and Sean had always been intimidated by my family. We didn't have a wedding ceremony, just a meeting between the families, and since then, my father and my mother-in-law hadn't met. At that meeting, my mother-in-law and Sean were so intimidated by my father's presence that they left quickly without much conversation, and it seemed my mother-in-law didn't remember his face. "Father-in-law, it's been a while," my mother-in-law said, sweating profusely. "No, I haven't caused any trouble. I just brought some belongings because I thought I could live in Shelley's shop. I haven't caused trouble for anyone," she explained, trying to act innocent while urging the workers to continue. "You intend to live here?" "I can't permit that," my father said sternly. "I own this building. The first floor is rented out as Shelley's aesthetic salon, and my daughter and I have a formal contract as the landlords and business operators. It is not allowed to use this place as a residence. If violated, you will need to vacate immediately." "I've just witnessed a violation. According to the contract, you must vacate immediately," my father said with a piercing gaze. I could feel the overwhelming authority in his eyes. "I understand. I can't make any excuses for this violation. We will vacate immediately," I responded. My father nodded and turned his gaze to my mother-in-law and Sean. "As you heard, I've agreed with the tenant to terminate the lease. If you enter here again, I'll have to call the police. You are now outsiders. Please leave this place." Saying that, he led me inside the shop, and we closed the shutter in front of them. My mother-in-law and Sean stood there, dazed for a while, but soon I could hear them arguing with the movers. The movers, needing to rush to their next job, eventually left the belongings on the roadside and departed. "Sean, handle this for now. Bring it to our apartment," my mother-in-law instructed. Sean, following her orders, quickly arranged a rental car and began transporting the belongings. Watching through a gap in the shutter, I said, "It turned out just as expected. They're heading to our apartment." "I'm glad I acted promptly. Thank you, Dad." My father's stern demeanor softened, and he smiled. Maybe I went a bit too far. Despite his intimidating appearance, my father is actually a very kind person. He dresses this way because he loves gangster films, but he's usually just a friendly local real estate agent. They're sure to be surprised when they arrive at the apartment. We chuckled quietly to ourselves. In reality, all the furniture and household items from the apartment had already been removed, leaving only Sean's personal belongings behind. After a while, my mother-in-law called, clearly distressed. "What happened? The room is empty. Where is the furniture?" Her voice was agitated and angry. I responded calmly, "I have terminated the apartment lease. I was the leaseholder and I made the payments, so it was within my rights to cancel it. The apartment is owned by my father, and we plan to dispose of any remaining belongings as abandoned property and change the locks soon. If you don't collect the personal items quickly, you'll have to meet my father again." Her voice trembled upon hearing my father's name. "So, where have you moved to? Let us come there. Won't you let us stay with you?" I answered with a snort. "I've just decided to divorce Sean, and we will not live together anymore. I recently told Sean that if you interfere with my shop, I would seek a divorce. He agreed, and I've kept his response as evidence. Due to the influence of you and Sean, I can no longer continue my aesthetic business in this building. Therefore, based on the agreement with Sean, I am proceeding with a divorce. As for the furniture, it belonged to me before our marriage, and it is only natural that I take it all." Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law began yelling at Sean, who was next to her. "How can you so easily agree to such a serious decision as divorce? The situation obviously required proper handling." I could hear Sean exclaim in surprise. "You shouldn't prolong this issue. Look for a new place to live instead," I told them before ending the call. Afterward, my mother-in-law and Sean struggled to find a new home and eventually had to rent a house from distant relatives. Sean's commute became difficult, and he quit his job to work part-time at a rural deli while scrambling to pay off his mother's debts. Meanwhile, I was able to move into a property owned by my father immediately. As for the termination of the aesthetic shop's lease, it was actually part of a plan, and in reality, the business continues to operate as before. Now the popularity of my aesthetic shop has grown significantly, and it's become so sought after that reservations are difficult to secure, even attracting celebrities. We warmly welcome male clients, and I regularly provide various beauty treatments for my father. Although he is nearing 70, the regular care at our shop has rejuvenated his skin, making him feel a bit closer to the actor he has always admired. Through these experiences, I've come to realize again that the essence of my job is to give each client confidence. The memory of my first free aesthetic treatment when I was in high school remains vivid, and the excitement and fresh feelings from that day continue to inspire my daily work. That experience taught me what I should offer through my interactions with many customers. I also think about Sean occasionally. If he had more self-confidence, perhaps a different future could have been possible for him. Despite being so close to me, it was difficult to provide him with the right support. His situation has taught me how challenging it can be to offer objective help due to closeness. If, in the future, Sean visits our aesthetic shop, I plan to interact with him impartially and spare no effort in supporting him to maximize his potential confidence. If I can give him the courage to take a new step forward, I believe it would be profoundly meaningful. Now that our son has moved out, you'll be returning to your family home. This house will be left empty and lonely, so we'll be moving in here instead. Don't worry, everything will be fine. My beloved husband passed away suddenly. After the funeral, my husband's parents came to me, overwhelmed with grief. This house, though filled with memories, few as they are, of the time I spent with my husband, is now a painful reminder of his absence. Why must I leave it so soon, without even a moment to wipe my tears? My mother-in-law told me coldly that I had no choice but to leave. My name is Hazel, and I work as a clerk at a real estate company. I met my husband Tham through my job. He was the brother of one of my colleagues, and since their workplaces were nearby, Tham often visited his brother. As a clerk, I was familiar with my colleague, who would eventually become my brother-in-law. Through him I met Tham, and we began spending time together, being invited to lunch by the brothers, and so on. Tham was cheerful and kind, and we got along well, though I didn't see him as a romantic interest at the time. I thought he felt the same way. However, an unexpected event changed everything. We had planned to meet at a restaurant reserved by my colleague, but he couldn't make it due to sudden matters. Though it was disappointing, we decided not to cancel the reservation, so Tham and I ended up spending time alone for the first time. I later discovered that my brother-in-law had orchestrated this, intending for Tom and me to be alone together over a meal. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, and we delved deeply into each other's lives, discovering how much we had in common. I was charmed by Tom's kind smile, and this day marked the beginning of a change in our relationship. It wasn't long before we got married, and I am deeply grateful to my brother-in-law for setting this in motion. Today was the first time I met my in-laws since our marriage. I was filled with anxiety, but my father-in-law and mother-in-law welcomed me warmly. Their friendly demeanor helped me relax. "Thank you for coming," my mother-in-law said, showing great care. "We've prepared a lot of food, hoping to make this a wonderful day." My in-laws, like my husband, had independent personalities and were approachable, which was a relief. They respected our decisions and never imposed their views on marriage or child-rearing. We talked about possibly living closer to them, but my husband and I had plans to build our own home. I inherited a piece of land from my grandfather, who was very fond of me. The property, recently renovated and located in a prime area, had skyrocketed in value due to recent redevelopment. As someone in real estate, I knew selling the property would be more advantageous than living in it. Although the location was excellent, the distance to our workplaces made it impractical to stay there. We decided to sell both the land and the house to fund our dream home. However, a significant change occurred when my husband, who worked in sales, was transferred to a different branch of his company. The corporation, with many branches nationwide, deemed him the only suitable candidate for the job, leaving us with no option but to accept. Given my own work commitments, we decided that he would go on a solo assignment, promising to return during the holidays. He also mentioned that my parents would come to visit occasionally, advising me not to push myself too hard and suggesting I might go out with them sometimes. "I don't mind going out. Your parents are nice people. However, it looks like selling the house will be delayed a bit, and my husband's solo assignment has begun." I felt a wave of loneliness and anxiety with the sudden change, but I had to push those feelings aside and look forward to reuniting with my husband as he had suggested. My in-laws, especially my mother-in-law, frequently visited on weekends. It seemed that my father-in-law used to be away on business trips, and my mother-in-law often shared her experiences of enduring loneliness while caring for her young sons. Even without children, she encouraged creating family memories, suggesting outings as a nice change of pace. "Let's go out together. Shopping might be a nice change," my mother-in-law would say. Thanks to her, I never felt completely alone, and my weekends became quite busy. However, I started to notice a pattern. Almost every weekend, she would suggest going out, and while the outings themselves were enjoyable, her insistence grew more forceful over time. After about a month, her invitations began to feel a bit pushy. She started disregarding whether I was tired or had household chores. When I mentioned wanting to rest, she looked at me as if I was being unreasonable. "It's fun to go out together, right? You don't dislike being with me, do you?" she would ask. "It's not that," I replied. "It's just that we go out every week, and I think you should rest too." She looked disappointed at my response, but when I reluctantly agreed, she would smile brightly, acting as if she had forgotten how persistent she had been. My concerns about her behavior grew. The places she insisted on taking me were always high-end, featuring expensive shopping and costly meals. Often she would leave the store first, making it seem like I was expected to cover the bill. She never thanked me for these payments, nor did she offer to contribute later. While my husband and I were financially comfortable, having both been committed to saving, I found my mother-in-law's extravagance unsettling. This issue persisted even when my father-in-law was present, and his presence only seemed to increase my financial burden. Discussing the issue with my husband was challenging. He had promised to come home during the holidays, but his work was extremely demanding, and he rarely had the chance to return. During a video call, I noticed the dark circles under his eyes and his haggard appearance, indicating his exhaustion. I'd understood that discussing this issue with my in-laws would only add to the stress. So I put on a brave face and said, "Your mother has been really good to me. You take care of yourself, Tom." I'm fine, so don't worry. Despite my reassurances, I continued to cover expenses related to my in-laws, unable to refuse their requests. Their behavior escalated, and one day, when I said I couldn't go out, they asked, "Could we borrow a little money? Just a small amount. We've already made a restaurant reservation and we'll take another friend instead of you, so could you lend us the shortfall?" I really didn't want to lend them money, but refusing would only complicate matters further. Reluctantly, I agreed. I reluctantly accepted my mother-in-law's request and withdrew the money from my wallet. Even then, I didn't discuss this situation with my husband. When I mentioned to my mother-in-law that I might bring it up with Tham, she responded that it would be embarrassing to talk to him about it. I was stunned. It seemed she was trying to take advantage of her son's wife rather than addressing her eldest son directly. I stopped expecting anything from my mother-in-law. Her requests for money became routine, disguised as pocket money, and I complied to avoid further pressure. I knew the problem was escalating, but found it difficult to address with her directly. Her behavior became increasingly bewildering and intrusive. She would suddenly visit our home without notice and inspect the interior closely, as if invading my privacy was her right. "This piece of furniture, a relic from Hazel's grandfather, it's lovely. You have such high-quality items here," she would say, admiring everything as if it were her own. Some of our furniture had been cherished by my grandfather, and my mother-in-law seemed fascinated by it, visiting frequently just to gaze at it. I began to seriously consider discussing her behavior with my husband. Although he might be surprised, it would be a relief to find a solution together. Her actions were intolerable, and although she was my mother-in-law, invading my privacy was unacceptable. I resolved to talk to my husband, but I also knew I had to wait until his assignment away from home ended. Hoped that his return would put an end to my mother-in-law's demands for money. With a faint hope, I persevered, looking forward to reuniting with him. Then an unexpected situation arose. Tham collapsed and was rushed to the hospital due to a sudden heart attack, likely from overwork. I was in shock when I received the call from his workplace. I rushed to the hospital, but despite the ambulance's speed, it was too late. The man who had always been the picture of health had passed away. I couldn't grasp the reality of it and was in a daze throughout the funeral. To be honest, I hardly remember anything from that time due to the overwhelming sense of loss. My brother-in-law came to assist, taking on many of the duties I would normally have handled. "You've just lost your brother too. I'm sorry for making you help so much," I said. "It's my brother's funeral. Of course I should help," he replied. "By the way, how are things with the land? Is the house ready?" After the funeral, my brother-in-law and I discussed the situation regarding the land and house. While tidying up, I reluctantly agreed to a proposal from my brother-in-law, assuring him it was fine. A few days after my husband's funeral, my in-laws arrived at our house, but it was immediately clear they were not here to offer condolences. "It's unfortunate that our son passed away so suddenly, but don't worry, we're here for you," my mother-in-law said with an unnervingly forced smile. To my shock, she had brought a truck filled with furniture and belongings from their family home. I was speechless, confused, and taken aback. It was obvious they were preparing to move in without any prior discussion. Their motives were clear. "You're after this land, aren't you?" I asked, my voice icy. My mother-in-law, with a cold smile, responded, "The value of this land has increased significantly. I've always had my eye on this house. It's thanks to this place that you could marry my son. I agreed to the marriage because you inherited this land." My heart sank as I struggled to process her words. "Are you saying you and father-in-law will be moving in with me?" I asked, bewildered. "Of course not. Don't be ridiculous," she snapped sharply, revealing her true intention to take over the house regardless of Tom's death. It became clear that they were planning to kick me out and claim the land for themselves, assuming I would vacate the house now that my husband was gone. "Now that your son is gone, you'll go back to your hometown, right? It would be sad to leave the house empty, so we'll live here instead," my mother-in-law said with a smile that only deepened my anxiety. I felt a surge of terror as I corrected her. "This house has already been sold," I said, struggling not to laugh at her misunderstanding. My mother-in-law's expression shifted to shock, and she stood there dumbfounded. At that moment, a truck from another moving company arrived. "Excuse us, we're here to help you move," the new movers said, confirming their presence after spotting the truck from the other company. The crew arranged by my mother-in-law also emerged from their vehicle, but their work had yet to begin. Seeing the other movers' arrival seemed to alert them that something was amiss. I asked my in-laws to explain their actions, but they were too flustered to respond clearly. Realizing that arguing wouldn't help, I instructed the movers arranged by my in-laws to move their truck away. I then bluntly told my in-laws, "This house has already been sold to someone else and they're scheduled to move in. We can't let you bring your belongings into someone else's home." To the surprise of both my in-laws and the movers, a luxury car pulled up and a wealthy-looking family stepped out. They were the new owners of the house and land, which were no longer mine. My in-laws were further confused and couldn't comprehend the situation. "Please move your truck quickly," I said firmly. "We need to clear the space for our new residents." As the truck from my in-laws' side moved away, the new movers began moving in the furniture. Unable to accept the situation, my in-laws confronted me aggressively. The new male homeowner, ensuring his family's safety, left them in the car and rushed over to us, adding to the commotion. "What's going on here? We bought this house. Why is there another moving truck? Please leave immediately," he demanded. I had no choice but to apologize profusely for the confusion caused by my in-laws' unexpected visit. However, they refused to leave and forcibly entered the house. The interior had changed significantly from what they remembered. None of the furniture they were familiar with was present. Seeing this, my mother-in-law panicked and started to create a scene. "What is this? The house is empty. There are no antiques, no lights. Those were my favorites. What's going on?" she cried out, unable to grasp the situation. Despite the new homeowner threatening to call the police, she remained stunned. My father-in-law seemed to snap out of his daze when he heard the man's voice. He quickly went over to my mother-in-law and dragged her out of the house. She calmed down a bit once she was away from the property. I apologized again to the new homeowner, who warned that there might be further trouble. At his request, I provided him with my in-laws' names and addresses to help resolve the situation. Exhausted but resolute, I went back to my in-laws to explain what had happened. I clarified that we had already completed the move a few days before my husband passed away, and that we had always planned to sell the house and the land. The sale had gone through as planned, despite a temporary delay due to my husband's solo work assignment. My brother-in-law had played a significant role in managing this. I had been overwhelmed by the demands for money from my in-laws and had kept it to myself to avoid adding to my husband's worries. This led to a deep sense of depression. During this time, my brother-in-law, who has always had a strained relationship with my in-laws, was my support. He'd assured me he would help and keep everything confidential. When he heard my story, he was furious with my in-laws. As an employee of a real estate company and my husband's brother, he was well aware of their plans. He had considered Tham his only family, but saw me as family as well. He suspected that my in-laws either intended to move into the house themselves or force us out to take over. According to him, my in-laws were naive, pretentious, boastful, and unscrupulous, especially my mother-in-law. Despite presenting a gracious facade in public, my mother-in-law was actually self-centered, cunning, and malicious. My brother-in-law's insights into my in-laws were shocking. My husband, the eldest son, was unaware of their true nature, likely because they always maintained a polished front. My brother-in-law suggested that we sell the land before my in-laws could take it from us. I agreed and began making the necessary arrangements. Although the house and land were important heirlooms from my grandfather, I didn't want to keep them if they were going to cause issues in my marriage. I didn't want to involve such cherished property in any further disputes. I had discussed this thoroughly with my husband, and when he learned of my in-laws' actions, he expressed regret for not realizing their true nature sooner. "I'm sorry I didn't see this before," he said. "If you think it's best to sell, let's do it before my parents can interfere. I'm truly sorry about letting go of Grandpa's house. I think Grandpa would have preferred us to move on rather than let it cause us problems." With that decision made, the first step was to find a new home and move without alerting my in-laws to our plans. Thanks to my brother-in-law's expertise in real estate, we quickly found a buyer for the house. We set a reasonable price considering the slight wear from our time there. The new owners, the family who had just arrived, signed the contract promptly. Originally, I had planned to wait for Tom to return to our new home, but now that he was gone, this was my only regret. As the movers began bringing in the new furniture, my in-laws could only watch in disbelief. The movers they had hired, angry and confused, demanded an explanation for the situation. They confronted my in-laws, who were too distraught to provide a coherent answer. After some trouble, the movers decided to leave for the day, but warned that additional fees would be incurred due to the unexpected circumstances. Realizing the truth, my mother-in-law, trembling and distraught, grasped at my clothes. "This is the house of my eldest son's wife. This is where we should live, right?" She tried to justify herself, but I ignored her and left with my belongings. The land now belonged to a new family, and I had no rights to it. The memorial service for my husband went smoothly, though my in-laws were present but left without addressing the house. Our interactions dwindled, and I found peace in my new life, even though I faced the sorrow of Tom's loss. Though I had savings from the sale of the house, Tom was no longer with me, and our plans for a new house had vanished. I tried to move forward, cherishing Tom's memory and returning to work. Meanwhile, my in-laws, especially my mother-in-law, seemed increasingly dissatisfied. I hadn't informed them of my new address, not wanting any further contact, which frustrated them greatly. Unable to visit their distant second son and not knowing my address, my mother-in-law's frustration grew. One night, she scattered gasoline around the house we had sold. Fortunately, a passerby noticed her suspicious behavior, and she was quickly restrained before any serious damage occurred. The police were alerted, and she was arrested for attempted arson after a lighter was found in her possession. The new homeowner, furious to discover that she was the same woman who had previously intruded, was understandably distressed. When I received a call about a lawsuit from the homeowner, I apologized profusely for the fear and inconvenience they had endured. There was nothing I could do to change my mother-in-law's actions. Unable to let go of her obsession with the house, my mother-in-law faced charges and was arrested. I repeatedly apologized to the homeowner, gaining some understanding and vowing that such an incident would never happen again. Raised in a wealthy environment where she could have anything, my mother-in-law's frustration and jealousy over not getting the house led her to commit a crime, ultimately landing her in prison. Ideally, my father-in-law should have supported her, but their relationship deteriorated after her arrest, leading to a forced divorce on his part. Even when she is released, she will have no home to return to. This is the result of her own choices. Despite feeling the loss of my husband, my brother-in-law provided comfort, reminding me that I still have family through him. Although my relationship with my in-laws has ended, I have not completely lost my sense of family. Believing that my husband is watching over me from heaven, I have decided to live my days in peace.
Are you playing on your computer in your room again? You really have an easy life, my mother-in-law, Kathy, commented with a disapproving tone. No, that's not true. I'm working from home. I'm not just playing around, I responded, trying to keep my voice steady. Oh, but I've seen you playing games on your computer screen before. Don't lie to me. I won't be fooled. Kathy absolutely refuses to accept that I work from home. To her, work means leaving the house and going to a physical office, and she's unwilling to reconsider this outdated notion. One day, she announced, Meg is coming back. I plan to let her stay here, so could you give up your room to her and leave? What? I was stunned. Does she realize Ken and I are the ones paying the $5,000 rent for this house? If I leave, that means... But before I could finish, I saw the cold determination in her eyes. Despite the absurdity of it, Kathy's efforts to push me out continued relentlessly. I decided it was time to go, just as she wanted. The very next day, the moving company she had called arrived. Which belongings should I move? One of the workers asked. All of mine, I replied calmly, watching as Kathy's face paled with every box they carried out. What are you doing? She finally demanded, her voice tinged with panic. Just taking all my belongings, I said, my tone even. As my things were loaded into the truck one after another, Kathy's expression turned increasingly blue. My name is Jane, a 34-year-old remote worker. My husband Ken, and I got married 2 years ago. At the time, I was working in an office where Ken was also a colleague. The company was small but had a warm, welcoming atmosphere. We often went out for drinks with our coworkers, and through our shared love of reading, Ken and I grew closer. After 3 years of dating, we got married. It was a beautiful workplace romance that blossomed into a life together. Our colleagues celebrated our marriage with great joy. Shortly after our wedding, I decided to pursue my long-held dream of working from home and left my office job. My juniors were teary-eyed as they wished me well. We'll miss you, senior. Please come visit us, they said, sending me off with bouquets and warm hugs. It was a wonderful company, and I hoped Ken would continue to thrive there. Since childhood, I've loved reading, which naturally led to a passion for writing novels. In my spare time, I would write and enter contests. One day, one of my works caught the attention of a publishing house that had previously shown interest in me. That was the moment my dream became a reality. I became a professional novelist. I quit my job just as we got married and made my debut in the literary world. Initially, Ken and I lived in a small apartment, where our life together was simple but filled with happiness. He was incredibly supportive, giving me the time I needed to write and even helping with household chores, especially when deadlines loomed. We truly supported each other. However, our peaceful life took a sudden turn when we received news that my father-in-law, Ben, had fallen ill. We rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. Lying quietly in the hospital bed was Ben, who had already passed away. Dad, Ken cried, but there was no response. No matter how much we called, Dad wouldn't wake up. Kathy held his cold hand, weeping, Dad. His passing left a profound impact on all of us, especially Kathy, who clung tightly to him, her sobs echoing through the room. I hadn't known Ben well, but seeing their grief, I couldn't help but cry with them. Little did I know then just how much his death would change our lives moving forward. As a novelist, my career was thriving. I had a book published and a series was starting in a magazine. My work was progressing smoothly, and my income was steadily increasing. Ken was my biggest supporter. Jane, you're amazing, he would say, beaming with pride. Quitting your job to focus on your writing was the right decision. I'll support you all the way. Keep it up. His encouragement was my greatest strength. 2 years had passed since Ben's death. Kathy, who had been deeply depressed initially, was gradually regaining her spirits and managing to live on her own. Meg had gotten married and moved to a place a bit far from her childhood home, making it difficult for her to visit often. Since we lived close to Ken's family home, Kathy frequently contacted Ken, inviting us over. Are you well? I bought some delicious sashimi today. Let's eat together, she would say. Or, I accidentally bought 2 packs of eggs. Could you come over and take one? Ken believed she must be lonely living alone, so we tried to visit as often as possible. Remembering the grief-stricken look on Kathy's face when Ben passed away, I wanted to comfort her, so I would often interrupt my work to accompany Ken. Seeing her face light up when we arrived made us both feel relieved. However, the frequency of Kathy's calls began to increase, and it started to affect my work deadlines. Around this time, Ken suggested, Jane's work is being impacted, and I'm getting tired too. How about we move in with my mother? The idea took me by surprise. Living together, I remembered stories from friends who had lived with their mothers-in-law and felt a wave of anxiety. Can I manage it with your mother? Ken reassured me, "It'll be fine, Jane. We'll set up a dedicated workroom for you so you can work without interruptions. We'll also ensure our bedroom and personal spaces are private. Plus, if something happens to Mom, we can respond quickly and we won't have to go out as much." Gradually, I warmed to the idea. I was concerned about Kathy, and the constant calls were disrupting my work schedule. Living together would be more convenient for us, and it would keep Kathy from feeling lonely. However, there was a practical concern. Our house was a bit small. Isn't it going to be difficult for 3 people to live in that house? I wondered aloud. I asked, "Is that true?" Ken nodded. "Yes, and I've been thinking about finding a slightly larger place for us." He showed me pamphlets of different properties. "You've already found one?" I asked, surprised. "Yeah, I've been considering it for a while. I think this apartment would be comfortable since it has many rooms," Ken replied. The apartment he had in mind was spacious, with plenty of layout options, but the rent was on the higher side. Still, given my current income, it wasn't unreasonable. I agreed with his proposal, saying, "That sounds good." Ken smiled warmly and said, "Thank you." He immediately contacted his mother, Kathy, who readily agreed to the plan. Kathy sold her house, and we all moved into the new apartment together. Looking back, I wish I had taken more time to understand Kathy before deciding to live together. I never imagined that this casual agreement would lead to deep regret later. At first, Kathy loved the new apartment. It had enough rooms, a spacious kitchen, and even a sauna in the bathroom. The rent was high at $5,000, but the place was comfortable and met all our needs. The newly built apartment had that pleasant new house smell, and both the interior and exterior were spotless. Seeing Kathy so delighted, almost childlike in her happiness, made me think that maybe living together was the right choice. Initially, everything went smoothly, and we lived together harmoniously. I had explained my work-from-home situation properly, and Kathy even helped with the household chores. Ken found it more convenient to commute since our new apartment was closer to the station, and he spent the extra time he gained with us. However, after a while, I noticed a change in Kathy's attitude. "Jane, what are you doing in your room all day? If you're just playing, can't you do something more productive?" she asked one day. "No, Kathy, as I mentioned before, I'm working," I replied. "I know you say it's work, but you're always engrossed in games, right?" she insisted. "No, that's not it," I tried to explain, but it seemed Kathy had misunderstood. She had once seen a game screen on my computer during a visit to my room and assumed I was pretending to work while playing. In reality, I was writing novels and also doing video editing work. The editing involved streams of a specific game, and Kathy had walked in while I was working on that. Actually, in addition to writing novels, I also do video editing as a side job, I explained. "Video editing? What's that? I don't quite understand, but it's still a game, right?" Kathy responded, her tone skeptical. "No, it's not," I tried to clarify. But Kathy shook her head, refusing to listen. "I won't be fooled anymore. I was helping with household chores because you said it was work, but I'm not doing it anymore. You should handle all the housework. Working from home sounds suspicious. Work should be done outside." "Kathy, it's possible to work without leaving the house nowadays," I tried to reason with her. "Don't try to deceive me," she snapped. I was surprised and confused by Kathy's sudden change in attitude. After that, her harsh treatment toward me intensified day by day. "Don't you notice there's trash on the hallway floor? Can you clean it?" she demanded. "You haven't started preparing dinner yet? I'm hungry. I want sweet and sour pork tonight, Jane. Please make it." Kathy stopped helping with household chores altogether, leaving everything to me. I had to interrupt my work daily to take care of the household tasks. When it was just the 2 of us, I could manage cooking in between work, but after Kathy moved in, it became increasingly difficult. As a result, I had to do video editing late into the night. As Kathy's harsh behavior escalated, I brought it up with Ken. However, he didn't take me seriously. "Mom bullying you? Impossible. She would never do that." Ken dismissed my concerns. "It's true," I insisted. "Recently, she's left all the household chores to me, so I can't focus on my work." "You're overthinking it, Jane. Mom is getting older and tires easily. Maybe that's why it feels like she's bullying you. Aren't you tired from your computer work?" Ken replied, completely siding with Kathy. "Don't you believe me?" I asked, disappointed. Ken's lack of understanding left me feeling isolated. After that, Kathy's treatment only got worse. Recently, she even started pressuring me about grandchildren, asking, "When will you have a child? When can I see my grandchild?" Kathy demanded. When I calmly explained that it was something for Ken and me to decide as a couple, she shot back, "Are you infertile? I'll introduce you to a doctor," and started dialing the hospital. I quickly took the phone from her. "I don't think we're infertile," I said firmly. "Please give us a little more time." Time? I don't have much time left. I want to see my grandchild. What's the point of having a daughter-in-law who can't bear children? Her sharp words cut through me, and the stress only intensified. "I'm sorry, but I have a work deadline approaching," I said, trying to escape to my room. "Off to play on the computer again? How lazy, while your husband works so hard," Kathy sneered. She completely refused to understand that I was working from home. Her belief that work must be done outside the house was deeply ingrained, and she seemed unwilling to change her mindset. As if that wasn't enough, she continued, "Meg is coming back soon. She plans to live here, so please give your room to her." "What? Why?" I asked, bewildered. "Meg is pregnant and wants to come back home for childbirth. Unlike you, she's a proper daughter-in-law fulfilling her role by getting pregnant. So, I want her to use your room," Kathy declared. I was utterly shocked by this sudden proposal. But before I could respond, Kathy added even more harshly, "So I want you to leave this house. Understand that properly." Why should I have to leave this house? Why am I being told such a thing? This is my home too, I protested, trying to make sense of the situation. Kathy laughed scornfully. "You say it's your home, but you're just a parasite who doesn't do any proper work. In fact, you're just in the way. If you want to play on your computer, you can go somewhere else. There's an internet cafe near the station." Unable to bear Kathy's relentless pressure, I finally said, "Okay, I'll leave," and decided to move out as she requested. Kathy's triumphant smile only deepened as I immediately went back to my room and began packing. I could hear her humming happily as I did so. That night, I decided to consult with Ken one more time. I wanted to gauge his reaction, but Ken never seemed to understand my feelings. "My mother couldn't have said such a thing. It's just another one of your delusions, Jane. Stop making Mom suffer." "Me? Making your mother suffer? Isn't it the other way around?" I retorted, but he wasn't listening. "If Maggie's coming back home for childbirth, why don't you go back to your parents' home for a while? It would be easier for her, and it's just for a short time," he suggested. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He wanted me to leave too. That was the breaking point. I felt my love for Ken start to fade, and I began to prepare for the move with new resolve. Kathy, clearly pleased that I was leaving, quickly arranged for a moving company. The next day, the movers arrived, arranged by Kathy herself. "Which belongings should we move?" they asked. Before Kathy could speak, I quickly responded, "All of my belongings, please." "All of them? What do you mean by all?" the movers asked, confused. "Everything," I replied calmly. "All the furniture and appliances in this house." Kathy's face flushed with shock. "Wait, what? What are you saying?" I continued to ignore her. "Would you like to move these items to your new home, or should we buy them from you?" the mover asked. "Please purchase them," I said without hesitation. Kathy, now in a panic, grabbed my arm and shook me hard. "What are you saying? Answer me." I knew the moving company Kathy hired also dealt with purchasing goods, which is why I had decided to sell everything. The movers began carrying out the furniture and appliances one by one. Kathy watched in disbelief as her belongings were taken away, but I remained calm. "Wait, what are you doing?" she demanded. "I'm just taking all my belongings," I replied, unbothered by her distress. "This is unbelievable. We have no place to live," Kathy cried out. "That's not my concern. I purchased these items for this house," I stated firmly. "Lies. You're lying again," she spat back. "If you think it's a lie, ask your son to confirm," I suggested coolly. Desperate, Kathy called Ken, who was at work. "Hey, is it true that Jane bought all the furniture and appliances in this house?" Kathy asked Ken frantically over the phone. "Yeah, Mom, that's right. Is there a problem?" "I'm in a meeting right now," Ken replied, sounding impatient before hanging up. I handed Kathy a piece of paper. "I'll leave this for you," I said. She looked down at it and saw that it was a divorce petition already signed by me. "What is this?" "I've decided to get a divorce," I stated calmly. "I'm leaving this house." "Divorce? Why?" I never said you had to leave, Kathy exclaimed, clearly taken aback. After being bullied by you and told to leave for your daughter's childbirth, do you think I have any reason to stay? Your son is a mama's boy who only listens to you and never tries to understand me. You said a daughter-in-law without grandchildren is useless. My role as your daughter-in-law ends here. Please give this divorce petition to your son. Kathy was initially stunned, but quickly retorted, maybe that's for the best. Now my daughter can stay here comfortably, and I won't have to deal with your seclusion anymore. I can use this big kitchen all by myself. How thankful I am. I responded coolly, well, whether your son can afford the rent for this house is another matter. She looked confused. What do you mean? The rent for this house is $5,000 a month, I informed her. Her complexion changed. $5,000? Yes, I confirmed. I have been paying it with the earnings from my novels. Novels? Kathy was clearly shaken. Here's the translation of your text, I continued, handing her a paper. Of course, Ken's salary alone could never cover a $5,000 monthly rent. You've always criticized me for just playing on the computer, but in reality, I've been working hard. I write novels, have published books, and even made it onto the bestseller list in newspapers. But I guess you wouldn't understand, since you think of me as a recluse. Kathy was at a loss for words. And about those games you mentioned, I have a talent in that field too. My editing work has increased, and so has my income. I've been paying for all the living expenses and miscellaneous costs of this house. The arrogant attitude Kathy had just moments ago completely vanished. Jane, wait a minute. I was wrong. I had no idea about any of this. Please don't leave. Without you, we can't live, she said, clinging to my feet. What is this all about? I muttered. It seems to me that you only need me to pay the rent. Kathy's eyes widened in surprise. No, it's not like that, she frantically denied. I said it wrong. You are needed by our family, by my son, so please don't think about divorce. Stay here, I'm begging you. But I calmly replied, it's too late, Kathy. I've already found a new place to live. I plan to spend my time there freely, writing my novels, I quietly told Kathy. She was trembling as she dialed her son. He's in a meeting, she shouted in frustration, but she persisted. Jane says she's leaving the house. She wants a divorce. What should we do? What about the rent? Once again, her only concern was the rent. She handed me the phone, and Ken's desperate voice came through. Jane, what's happening? Why a divorce? You never listened to me, I replied calmly. You even told me to leave, just following your mother's orders. That was just temporary, he insisted. I didn't mean forever. I've tried to talk to you many times about the way your mother treated me, but you always took her side. I can't stay here any longer. The movers are already here. I'm leaving. So enjoy living with your family starting tomorrow, and do your best to pay the rent. I hung up the phone. Everything is done. What's next? The movers asked, the room now completely empty. Yes, we're ready to leave, I said, picking up my bag and turning towards Kathy. I appreciate everything, Kathy. Take care. With that, I left the house with the movers. When Ken returned from work, he found the house empty, no furniture, no appliances, and Kathy sitting alone, looking lost. He too stood there, bewildered by the emptiness. Ken initially opposed the divorce, but I submitted recordings of the bullying I had endured as evidence through a lawyer and formally filed for divorce. Eventually, Ken accepted the situation, and we officially divorced. Without my income to cover the $5,000 rent, the family had no choice but to cancel the lease. By the time my sister-in-law returned, Ken, Kathy, and Meg had moved into a small rental apartment. They had to purchase new furniture and appliances, which left them with little money for rent, forcing them into an even more cramped living space. To make matters worse, it turned out that Meg hadn't returned home for childbirth, but because she had been divorced after an affair and kicked out by her husband. She might have expected to live in a luxurious apartment, but instead, she faced life in a small, cramped space, along with the added burden of alimony debt. From what I've heard, the entire family is barely making ends meet with their jobs. Meanwhile, I bought a new high-rise apartment. There, I freely write novels, work on video editing, and live comfortably without having to consider anyone else. I eat what I want, rest when I please, and enjoy my days in peace. I've even started a new series, and the joy I find in my work is unending. For now, I plan to stay away from romance and marriage, fully enjoying my single life focused on my career.
I'm Emily, and Jake, who is 2 years my senior, is a man of science, living out his childhood dream with a fulfilling research job. Despite his busy schedule, he seems content. Our 3-year-old son, Mike, shares Jake's love for observation and experimentation, currently fixated on the goldfish he snagged at the fall festival. Meanwhile, our 1-year-old daughter, Sarah, is a delightful eater with her adorable chubby white cheeks, bringing comfort and joy to our household. Life is generally good for our ordinary family, except for one recurring concern: dinner. Just as I was trying to soothe my crying daughter and finish preparing dinner, the doorbell rang. Without hesitation, my mother-in-law walked in, a frequent visitor around this time, enough for Mike to hardly glance away from the TV. "My goodness, fried food again," she exclaimed, expressing concern about its impact on Jake's stomach and the grandkids. Mike, however, loves it. My mother-in-law swiftly took charge, offering a creamy vegetable stew and minestrone, enough to last for at least 3 days. As she set the table, my spirits sank at the sight of the mostly carrot and cabbage-filled stew. Interrupting my thoughts, she insisted I pack up the food she brought. Despite its lack of appeal, wasting food was not an option. This routine, familiar since her last unexpected visit, where she swapped my clam chowder for her fried chicken, concluded with her leaving without acknowledging her grandchildren. After she left, my son softly remarked, "Grandma took my fried chicken again." My heart ached at his sad face, but I assured him there was a little meat left. As I heated up the oil, I felt relieved seeing my son's joyful reaction to the promise of more food. Yet beneath the surface, my dissatisfaction lingered. My mother-in-law's intrusion had escalated since my marriage, peaking over the last year. Each week, unannounced during dinner prep, she would criticize my cooking and parenting, leaving her cream stew behind. In the past 6 months, she started taking our food home, undermining our meals. As I juggled baby food and distracted the kids, the tough task of cooking continued. My family's happiness kept me going, but my fried chicken, braised pork, mapo tofu, and hamburgers, all of it, ended up in her hands. I inherited a love for cooking from my restaurant-running family, particularly my dad, who taught me the art. Confident in my culinary skills, I firmly believe that my cooking surpasses my mother-in-law's overly sweet cream stew. However, since Mike, our son, entered the picture, I've found it challenging to assert myself against his grandmother. When Jake, my husband, returns home after the kids have gone to sleep, he grimaces at dinner. With only Mike's share of fried chicken remaining, I serve Jake a generous portion of the cream stew, resigned to the fact that it's what my mother-in-law brings over. Frustrated by having my skills undermined, I express my discontent to Jake, urging him to tell his mother if he doesn't like it. Jake, as non-committal as ever, pokes at the stew, avoiding confrontation with his mother. Despite her intrusion during Sarah's nap time and taking away Mike's favorite foods, Jake rationalizes it by mentioning her loneliness since his father's passing 2 years ago. I sigh deeply, realizing Jake tends to avoid confrontation when his mother is involved. The only relief is that she hasn't suggested moving in yet. Tired of the routine, my mother-in-law surprises me with a different proposition during one of her dinner visits. She announces that everyone will gather at our place for Christmas this year, a departure from the usual family reunions at her brother-in-law's or her childhood home. Responding with little enthusiasm, I wonder how she plans to host the gathering. She frowns at my apparent lack of understanding and declares that I'll be helping too, assigning me tasks for the 24th. Despite my quick objections, she dismisses my concerns, suggesting I use a baby carrier for Sarah. Not only am I expected to clean up, but I'm also entrusted with preparing the full-course Christmas meal, with a strict warning against repackaging store-bought food or serving anything that tastes bad. Stunned by the audacity of her decision, I try to object, but my mother-in-law, satisfied with her directives, leaves abruptly. When I share the news with Jake that night, he is as bewildered as I am. We contemplate her plans to host a Christmas party, inviting relatives from both his dad's and her sister's families. Frustrated, I finally lose my temper, expressing my feelings of always being pushed around. Jake, realizing the severity of the situation, goes silent and, with a resigned sigh, agrees to handle the cleaning and entertaining of relatives. I'm relieved to hear Jake's proposal. It provides some direction. However, he adds a request. Can you still cook the full-course Christmas meal? Jake gazes at the meatloaf his mother-in-law left for us, making it hard to refuse. After some hesitation, I reluctantly agree. Just for this year, let's keep Mom's reputation intact. Plus, everyone in the family loves your cooking, he pleads. Fine, just for this year. Thanks, man. I can't wait for Emily's Christmas feast, he says cheerfully. I brace myself, knowing it's just for this time, and agree to prepare a full-course Christmas meal. When I inform my mother-in-law that Jake will stay over to help with cleaning, she makes a displeased face, commenting on how the man of the house shouldn't do such things. Despite her discontent, she seems reasonably satisfied seeing Jake bustling around at his parents' home for my sake. Then comes Christmas lunchtime. Emily, is the corn soup ready? I'm preparing the croutons now. I respond, scurrying around the kitchen to get the carpaccio and corn soup ready. You're so inefficient. I'll bring the food myself, she declares. I'm sorry. If you're going to complain, try preparing a meal for 20 people. It's really exhausting. Finally, the serving is done, and I sit down at the party. Jake, having put our daughter down for a nap in another room, has been supportive. Preparing a full-course Christmas meal for 20 people was challenging, but it feels good to see everyone enjoying my cooking. However, that good feeling lasts only a moment. This quiche looks so beautiful. It's like something you'd buy. Thank you. Geez, you're good at flattery. This carrot slaw is perfectly balanced with the vinegar. The orange scent really freshens up your mouth. That's because Christmas meals tend to be rich, so I made it a bit more acidic. Something's off. Every time someone tries to compliment my Christmas cooking, mother-in-law interrupts. Something is not right, she declares, revealing the source of this awkwardness. Sophia, father-in-law's sister, comments, Emily, mother-in-law, is such a great cook, isn't she? Confused, I let out a dumbfounded sound. Unperturbed, Sophia continues her story. Did Olivia make this entire Christmas feast? That's amazing. Huh? I haven't cooked a full-course Christmas meal in ages. I was going to leave it to my daughter-in-law, but she's absolutely terrible in the kitchen and never comes by, even when I offer to teach her. Mother-in-law talks about struggles she never even faced, leaving me puzzled. Oh, Emily, you should really take after Olivia while she's still well. Jake might miss the taste of home sometimes, you know. The way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Daniel, a relative hanging around, laughs as if mocking me. You know, Olivia, that pork belly stew you made last time was delicious. It's amazing you can cook both Western and Japanese dishes. It's not that big of a deal, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. Mother-in-law smiles and feigns humility. That pork belly stew was clearly my creation. As I stand there astonished, she mouths, "Go along with it." Apparently, she's been claiming all my dishes, including the Christmas feast, as her own and sharing them with the family. Now she wants me to be complicit in her lie. No way, especially after she's been criticizing my cooking all this time. Though I want to speak out. Overwhelmed by the crowd, I find myself speechless until my young son becomes my unexpected savior. Mom, this omelet is really tasty. It looks different than usual, but your omelets are always good, echoes his high-pitched voice, silencing the noisy adults. Sophia, perhaps out of kindness, attempts to cover for my son, saying, "Oh, Mike, this is actually what your grandmother made." Astonished, my son responds, "Huh? But it's tasty, so it's got to be Mom's omelette." Grandma's omelette is super sweet and gritty. It doesn't taste good. He passionately insists, gesticulating wildly, leaving the adults exchanging puzzled glances. Panic ensues, and the mother-in-law tries to intervene, saying, "Emily, don't teach the child to lie." Excuse me? Who's the one lying here? Mom, am I a liar? Mike looks up at me, his face full of insecurity. That's when I feel my blood boil. Frustrated, I declare, Mike is not a liar. The one lying here is you, Grandma. Huh. She must not have expected me to stand up to her. My mother-in-law looks shocked as I stand up, pointing dramatically at the table. I made this entire Christmas feast, including the corn soup. Everything from start to finish. Naturally, the room erupts in response. My flustered mother-in-law begins to panic and yells, "Wait, wait, wait. Emily, you've been lying this whole time. Have you lost your mind?" "I'm not lying," I assert. Sophia, pulled into this, looks up at me surprised. "Yes, it was delicious. I made that too." You're terrible, stealing credit for Jake's mom's cooking and trying to set her up. "You're the worst daughter-in-law," I accuse. Attempting to defend herself, my mother-in-law hesitates, then shouts, "It's a secret family recipe. I can't tell you in public." The relatives, initially disgusted by our petty fight, start to see who was in the right. But my husband Jake appears near the door, restraining me with a stern voice and face. "Emily, that's enough." My mother-in-law clings to Jake, looking like a tragic heroine. Jake, addressing his mother, says, "Mom, you're the awful one here. This entire Christmas feast Emily made all day while taking care of the kids. Trying to take credit for it is pretty low." Caught in the middle again, Sophia looks at the creamy stew, recalling how sweet it was. "Yeah, it was insanely sweet, wasn't it, Mom?" Seizing the opportunity, Jake reveals, if it's sweet, it's tasty. She's always been cautious about salt and oil, but uses sugar with no limits. So all her dishes taste like a block of sugar. The truth unfolds, exposing mother-in-law's lies. Disillusioned, the family realizes that all the recent dishes were likely made by me, not her. Mother-in-law, exposed for all her lies, panics and tries to appeal to Jake's emotions. "Why are you siding with your daughter-in-law? I'm your mom," she pleads. The revelation leaves everyone in the family disillusioned with the mother-in-law. "I never wanted to say this, Mom. I thought your actions were driven by loneliness since Dad isn't here, so I've been having Emily put up with you. But what you're doing is nothing short of harassment towards her. There's no reason to protect you anymore. Don't see Emily or the kids ever again." Jake, firm in dismissing his begging mother, starts to clean up the Christmas feast. Then he apologizes to the relatives, saying, "I'm sorry for the disturbance this Christmas. Emily, Mike, let's go." As Jake takes Mike's hand and stands up, Mike glances at his grandmother and asks, "Grandma, where's your I'm sorry?" "When you lie, you say I'm sorry, then you get forgiven, right? Isn't that right, Mom?" I get it. You have to be forgiving when it comes to raising kids, but a simple sorry isn't going to cut it." Luckily, I didn't have to worry for even a second. Mother-in-law clenched her lips so tightly they looked like they'd bleed, clearly having no intention of apologizing. Seeing her, Jake sighed as if he had enough. Grandma can't even say I'm sorry, and she's supposed to be an adult. How sad. Let's go home and have Mom's delicious Christmas feast. Okay. We left behind a growling mother-in-law and confused relatives, carrying our sleeping daughter and the Christmas feast. As we left Mike's house, we went straight to my parents' place and served the Christmas feast. Everyone was delighted and ate with joy. This is what I had been striving for, so my heart was full. Jake, of course, apologized profusely and promised never to let us meet his mother-in-law again. Apparently, the atmosphere at my house remained awkward. His relatives dispersed, leaving only a soulless mother-in-law and some bland food. The next day, mother-in-law's sister and her husband, as well as Jake's sister, visited as promised. Seeing the bland food, they chuckled and said figures. Apparently, mother-in-law's lack of cooking skills was a well-known fact among her relatives. "So, you brag about hosting a Christmas feast. I wondered what magic trick you'd pull, probably just jealous of Emily, who's good at cooking and praised by Jake and Mike." "Sorry for the inconvenience," they said after hearing the details from Jake. "My sister-in-law thanked me for my efforts, and Sophia called to apologize. I'm sorry for jumping to conclusions. It turns out Sophia also enjoys cooking, and we bonded over a recipe for braised pork belly. The misunderstanding with Jake was cleared up, and I found new friends who share my cooking hobby. I felt refreshed, enjoying a carefree Christmas. Of course, mother-in-law wasn't going to back down that easily, but I was well prepared. As I was making cornbread, my phone rang. It was mother-in-law. Excuse me, where are you? It's dinner time. Do your duty as a wife. Are you making the same mistake and coming over again? She's furious on the other end of the line. How dare you? I came here because you didn't apologize. Come home and clear the misunderstanding with our relatives. Then I'll forgive you for embarrassing me. No thanks. What? You'll be the one left out by the family. That won't be a problem. What to begin with, the one who put on airs and got shunned by the relatives was mother-in-law. I've even made plans to cook with Sophia next time. What? Mother-in-law probably never imagined that I become close to father-in-law's side of the family. So, what now? Still got any moves left? I add another blow to the stunned mother-in-law. Also, I'm not returning to that house. What? Yes, the kids and I have been staying at my parents' house since Christmas. We're planning to find a new place to live now that the holidays are over. Initially, living near Mike's family was mother-in-law's strong insistence, but Jake's workplace is actually closer to my parents' house. Didn't Jake tell you to stay away from daughter-in-law? But since mother-in-law can't listen better than a child, we've decided to physically distance ourselves. Right now, Jake is the only one living there, and he'll leave once he's ready. What? Where? Where are you? Who knows? You think you can get away with not cherishing Jake's mom? Yes, because Jake and sister-in-law have forgiven me. It's okay. Well, wait. What? Thank you for everything so far, mother-in-law. I'm so happy I'll never have to see you again. Goodbye. Wait a minute. With a bit of a laugh, I hang up on mother-in-law, who's screaming like a villain in a superhero show. Then I block her number to make sure I never have to hear her voice again. 2 years later. Mom, what's for dinner today? Hamburgers. Yay! I love Mom's burgers the most in the world. Sarah loves them too. Dad loves them the most in the universe. Dad, that's not fair. My family happily waits for my cooking in the living room, playing around as I fry the burgers in the kitchen. My heart warms up again today, watching them eagerly await my cooking, smiles on their faces.
Could you be the guest I was expecting? I have something crucial to discuss with you. Please, can you spare a moment? As I was about to step into the restaurant, a woman in chef's attire, looking visibly anxious, approached me. Initially, I assumed she wanted to confirm something about my meal, but what she revealed left me utterly stunned. My name is Cheryl Ruth, and I'm a 33-year-old advertising professional. My career is demanding yet deeply fulfilling as I strive to create meaningful advertisements. I met my husband, Brian, at work. He's a year older than me, and we've been married for a year now. With 2 incomes, we share household responsibilities seamlessly, supporting each other and managing our busy lives. Our early interactions were strictly professional, but over time, we grew closer through personal conversations and discovered shared interests and values. It wasn't long before I developed feelings for him. Fearing we might drift apart once our joint project ended, I mustered the courage to confess my feelings. Despite my anxiety, Brian reciprocated, and we began dating. A year later, he proposed, and we got married. Before our wedding, Brian opened up about his past. He had been married before, but the union ended due to incompatible values. Though he carried some regrets about his first marriage, I understood his hesitations and reassured him that his history didn't define our future. My desire was to build a life with him, and I wholeheartedly accepted his past. Our married life has been a joy. We moved into an apartment conveniently located near our workplaces, and Brian's parents, who live nearby, have been incredibly supportive. Initially, I worried about potential conflicts living so close to my in-laws, but they've always been welcoming and kind, making our transition to married life smooth. Balancing work and personal time can be a challenge. On weekdays, our interactions are often limited to brief conversations over dinner. However, we make the most of our weekends, with cooking becoming one of our favorite activities. It's a necessity, too, given my dietary restrictions. I have a severe allergy to fruits in the Rosaceae family: strawberries, apples, pears, and peaches. The allergy developed unexpectedly in adulthood, starting with a terrifying reaction to strawberries that left me struggling to breathe. After tests confirmed the allergy, I had to accept that many of my favorite fruits were off-limits. Dining out has since become a challenge. Even when I think a dish is safe, hidden ingredients can pose a threat. Just a trace of these fruits can cause severe reactions, making me hypervigilant about verifying ingredients. This constant caution sometimes makes dining out feel like a burden, so I've grown to prefer eating at home. Cooking has become a haven for me, a joyful, safe activity that allows me to relax and enjoy meals. Brian and his parents have been incredibly supportive. My mother-in-law, having cared for her father with a severe wheat allergy, understands the seriousness of my condition. She took the time to learn about my dietary needs, ensuring every meal we shared was safe for me. "You shouldn't have to worry during meals. I'll make sure everything is safe for you," she once assured me, a gesture that nearly brought me to tears. Over time, I've developed a wonderful relationship with my in-laws, especially my mother-in-law, who treats me like her own daughter. Her empathy and efforts have made managing my allergies much less stressful. One memorable day, I received a promotion at work for spearheading a successful project proposal. It was a proud moment, made even sweeter when I returned home to celebrate with Brian and my in-laws. Their unwavering support has been a cornerstone of my happiness, both at work and in my personal life. I shared the exciting news of my promotion with my family, and they were all thrilled, especially my mother-in-law. To celebrate, she suggested we dine at an upscale restaurant located in a luxurious hotel, a place I had dreamt of visiting since my student days. Though excited, I hesitated. The restaurant's grandeur, coupled with my dietary restrictions, made me uneasy. "You don't have to hold back, it's such a joyous occasion. Let me treat you," she insisted, her excitement evident. Her enthusiasm warmed my heart, but my concerns lingered. Before my allergy diagnosis, I had browsed the restaurant's website and fantasized about trying their famous fruit-filled tart. Unfortunately, the restaurant frequently used fruits from the Rosaceae family in their dishes, which made me nervous. In the past, we always informed staff of my allergies in advance, but I couldn't shake the guilt of asking for special accommodations. We typically chose restaurants that rarely used such fruits to avoid any risk. Even though this restaurant could prepare allergen-free dishes, the potential for cross-contamination in a kitchen that regularly handled those ingredients felt daunting. Initially, I leaned towards caution, preferring to celebrate somewhere I could relax without fear. However, my mother-in-law's persistence and reassurance swayed me. "Don't worry, I'll let them know about your allergies when I make the reservation. I also happen to know someone there, they'll take extra care of us," she said confidently. Her connection to the restaurant surprised me, as she'd never mentioned it before. Coupled with her thoughtful approach, I began to feel more at ease. When I discussed it with my husband, he was just as surprised by her connection, but reassured knowing they'd be well informed. "It's a celebration of your success, make sure to enjoy yourself," he encouraged with a smile. His support, along with my mother-in-law's enthusiasm, finally convinced me to embrace the occasion. The lunch was scheduled for a weekday, so I took a half-day off from work. After completing my morning tasks, I dressed in a more formal outfit than usual, paying extra attention to my appearance. My colleagues noticed and wished me a wonderful time when they learned about my plans. When I arrived at the hotel, my mother-in-law was already waiting for me. Together, we made our way to the restaurant on the first floor. Thanks to her reservation, we were promptly escorted to our table, though we were informed of a slight delay due to the busy lunch hour. Understanding the popularity of the place, I decided to start with just drinks and wait patiently. Relaxed after finishing work and enjoying the warm company of my mother-in-law, I felt ready to make this celebration memorable. I ordered champagne, and my mother-in-law and I enjoyed delightful conversation, savoring the elegance of the restaurant. The ambience, paired with the superior taste of the champagne, heightened my spirits. Although I'd had champagne before, the glass I sipped that day felt special, perhaps because of the celebration or the allure of finally being in a place I had admired for years. As we chatted, the tantalizing dishes being served to nearby tables only added to my anticipation for our meal. However, just as I began to settle into the moment, my phone rang from inside my bag. I hadn't turned it off, and seeing it was a call from work, a sudden wave of sobriety replaced my joy. Worried it might be urgent, I excused myself and stepped outside the restaurant to take the call in private, ensuring I could address any sensitive matters without disruption. Thankfully, the issue was minor. My colleague needed clarification on a document I had submitted earlier. Relieved it wasn't an error, I quickly provided the answers they needed. Just as I was about to hang up, an unfamiliar woman approached me. "Excuse me, are you the customer who made the reservation for today's meal?" she asked, dressed as a chef. She looked rushed and slightly breathless, her expression laden with concern. Puzzled by her presence outside the kitchen during such a busy time, I nodded cautiously. Her next words sent a chill down my spine. "It's dangerous to return to the restaurant now. Please leave the hotel immediately and ensure your safety." Her intense demeanor and urgent tone left me stunned. Though I tried to seek further explanation, her insistence and the gravity of her warning made my blood run cold. Without fully understanding the situation but sensing genuine danger, I hailed a taxi and headed home. That evening, my phone rang again. It was my mother-in-law, and to my surprise, her tone was sharp and furious, unlike anything I had encountered from her before. "You just left without a word. Don't you have any manners? What kind of upbringing did you have?" she chastised, her voice dripping with anger. She was clearly embarrassed and upset that I had left abruptly, leaving her to handle the reserved special course alone. Her harsh words stung, and I realized the gravity of the misunderstanding. Yet what shocked me most was her lack of concern for my sudden departure. Instead of worrying about my well-being, she berated me relentlessly. "You've been silent this whole time. Don't you realize how wrong you were? You're not fit to be my son's wife," she raged. Her tirade even extended to criticizing my parents and how they had raised me. When she finally paused, I gathered the courage to speak. "You told me you informed the restaurant about my allergies when you made the reservation so I could relax. But the restaurant wasn't aware of my allergies. What happened?" Her silence was deafening. The truth was that the meal prepared for us that day contained ingredients I was severely allergic to, not only in the dessert but also in the main courses, hidden in marinades and sauces. The woman who approached me outside the restaurant had taken the reservation call from my mother-in-law and confirmed that no mention of my allergies had been made. She had noticed the allergy badge on my bag and decided to check on me just in case. If she hadn't warned me, I would have unknowingly consumed the food and suffered a severe allergic reaction. But the real revelation came next. The chef revealed that she was my husband's ex-wife, now working under the name Julia. Recognizing my mother-in-law and realizing I was her son's new wife, she intervened out of concern. Julia shared that my mother-in-law was notorious for her harsh behavior. During her marriage, Julia had lived with my husband's parents and endured relentless criticism from my mother-in-law, particularly when my husband or father-in-law wasn't around. Despite Julia's professional culinary skills, my mother-in-law found fault with everything she did, even discarding her dishes out of spite. Her account painted a starkly different picture of the woman I thought I knew. It wasn't just the sharp tone of my mother-in-law's phone call, it was the realization of her deliberate carelessness that shook me to my core. I had always seen my mother-in-law as a gentle and kind woman, but the events that unfolded revealed a very different side of her. The hostility she exhibited, hidden beneath a polished facade, forced me to reconsider the dynamics of my new family and how I should navigate these relationships going forward. Her true nature became more apparent as I uncovered her troubling history with Brian's ex-wife, Julia. After transitioning to a full-time housewife, Julia found herself financially dependent and under her mother-in-law's constant scrutiny. Trapped, isolated, and without evidence of her mistreatment, Julia eventually sought escape through divorce. Despite her lack of work experience, she leveraged her culinary training to build a career, rising through the ranks to become a skilled chef. However, her past resurfaced when my mother-in-law discovered her workplace and began demanding discounts under the guise of their connection. This pattern of manipulation hinted at a deep-seated behavior that extended to me. When I confronted my mother-in-law about failing to disclose my allergies during the restaurant reservation, she initially feigned ignorance, trying to shift the blame onto the staff. However, the restaurant's policy of recording calls meant her lie was easily exposed. Faced with the possibility of evidence, her composure shattered, and she confessed her resentment. "I despise how you outshine me. You deserve some pain," she admitted, her words cutting deeply. This shocking revelation made it clear that her envy had driven her to put my life at risk. To address the situation, I decided to involve my family and Brian. In the presence of my parents, we confronted her with the recorded evidence. When Brian heard her incriminating statements, he was furious. "I can't believe you would do this, Mom," he said, his voice tight with anger. Her desperate attempts to explain fell on deaf ears as Brian declared, "We're cutting ties. I don't even want to think of you as my mother anymore." The fallout was swift. Brian informed his father, who was equally enraged and decided to separate from her. Left with no support system, she was evicted from their home. Her husband, showing a final act of pity, paid for a small apartment's first month's rent and told her to fend for herself. However, she continued to cling to us, even barging into our house one day to demand money. Brian firmly sent her away, making it clear she was no longer welcome in our lives. Rumors later suggested she had taken a job at a local supermarket, struggling to adjust to her new circumstances. Despite everything, I hoped she would work diligently, not only to support herself, but also to reflect on her actions. For my part, I resolved to maintain firm boundaries to protect our family from her manipulations. In the aftermath, Brian reached out to Julia to apologize for not recognizing her suffering during their marriage. She assured him she had moved on, now happily dating someone else. Surprisingly, Julia and I became friends through this ordeal. As career-oriented women, we found common ground and mutual respect, unclouded by her past relationship with Brian. To celebrate my promotion and reaffirm their support, Brian and his father hosted a party in my honor. Their thoughtful gesture reminded me of the strength of our bond and my resolve to continue thriving, free from the shadows of my former mother-in-law's interference. The experience, though painful, ultimately strengthened my confidence and the foundation of our family. After returning from a week-long overseas trip, I was taken aback by a call from my mother-in-law, Jessica, with palpable excitement in her voice. She told me that she had found $32,000. I was immediately confused, given that as a freelancer, I maintain only modest emergency savings and don't typically keep large sums of cash on hand. Plus, my banking card was safely in my possession, and no one should have been able to withdraw such a hefty amount without my knowledge. Jessica explained that she had taken the money from a drawer in our sideboard, assuming we were financially well off. While I appreciated her intentions, I was baffled as to why she thought she had permission to take such a large sum without asking. This left me with one pressing question: where had the $32,000 come from? The mystery lingered for a month, until Kevin, presumably her husband, came home. Although the situation was beginning to resolve, there were still unresolved questions. Over that month, Jessica had called me no less than 136 times. At first, I ignored them, not understanding why she was calling so frequently, but when I finally answered, she accused me of something I couldn't quite grasp. She seemed upset, but her reasons were unclear, and the accusatory tone only added to my confusion. As I tried to piece things together, the situation grew more complicated. I soon realized that Jessica wasn't just talking to me, she was also speaking to Lisa, a 33-year-old freelance jewelry designer, who had been sharing her ambitions and struggles. Lisa, who had always dreamed of having children, was finding it hard to balance her career with her desire to start a family. Meanwhile, her husband Kevin, also 33, had shifted gears in his career, leaving a steady job to become her business partner as Lisa's career grew. When Lisa and Kevin first married, they relied heavily on Kevin's income, as Lisa was just starting out, but by the time Lisa reached her 30s, her business had taken off, and she needed help managing the demands of her growing career. Kevin left his stable job to help her with the business, which flourished with his support, securing contracts with renowned international brands. Yet despite their success, they faced ongoing challenges, particularly with Kevin's mother, Jessica. Living alone in the family home, Jessica had a distorted view of their lifestyle, imagining that they lived in luxury, constantly attending extravagant parties and dinners with corporate elites. While these events were part of Lisa's professional responsibilities as a jewelry designer, Jessica believed they were just lavish social indulgences. This misconception bled into her financial expectations as well. She often asked Lisa and Kevin for money to host her own social gatherings, assuming their perceived wealth could easily cover her desires. Despite being financially capable of supporting Jessica, Lisa and Kevin's lifestyle wasn't as glamorous as Jessica imagined. The events they attended were necessary for their business image, and maintaining this image required significant expenses, like dressing elegantly and dining at upscale restaurants. But Jessica frequently expressed envy toward their lifestyle, often with a sarcastic undertone, and she didn't shy away from making requests for financial help. While Lisa consistently declined these requests, Kevin, seeing his mother's constant demands, occasionally gave in, hoping to maintain peace and avoid disruptions to their work. Unfortunately, this only seemed to fuel Jessica's expectations, leading to even more frequent and unreasonable demands. A recent visit from Jessica added more tension to the situation. She insisted that Kevin buy her an extravagant new dress for an upcoming social event, even though we suggested a more affordable option, like a simple three-piece suit. But Jessica was insistent on the lavish dress, claiming that it was essential for the occasion's grandeur. She even demanded a matching handbag, expecting us to cover that expense as well. To handle her financial demands more efficiently, Kevin set up a credit card in Jessica's name, instructing her to use it for her expenses. Initially, this seemed like a reasonable solution. Jessica's spending got out of hand, and Kevin had to step in to rein her in. He set a new rule: she would need to consult him before making any significant purchases. The intention was to give her some independence while keeping her spending in check, finding a balance between her desires and our need to manage finances responsibly. Despite the new restriction, Jessica's habits didn't change much. She went ahead and bought an expensive ring without consulting us first, and the costs quickly began to pile up, putting a strain on our finances. Kevin, who was handling the bills, soon realized the situation had become unsustainable. Frustrated by Jessica's disregard for the financial consequences, he imposed a spending cap on her credit card. When Jessica found out she couldn't pay for her latest shopping spree because of the new limit, she was furious. She stormed into our house, questioning the fairness of the restriction. She argued that her enjoyment of luxury was no different from our professional need to dress up for glamorous events. We tried to explain that the events we attended, product launches and parties, were essential to our work, often hosted in lavish settings, but Jessica only saw it as indulgence on our part, not understanding the professional obligations that came with these appearances. After the spending cap was introduced, Jessica's complaints quieted down a bit. Though she still voiced her discontent to Kevin from time to time, life settled into a more manageable routine, and as the year came to a close, an exciting opportunity presented itself. A foreign brand offered us the chance to expand internationally, and this proposal thrilled me. It felt like a step toward joining the ranks of top-tier designers. Kevin, who was overseeing the business side of things, also recognized the importance of the opportunity and was eager to seize it. However, despite the excitement, Kevin and I had concerns about how Jessica would react, given her history of excessive spending. When we shared the news of the potential overseas expansion, her response was exactly what we expected. Jessica accused us of planning to live luxuriously abroad under the guise of work, fearing that we were preparing to relocate permanently. To ease her anxiety, I reassured her that we would return once our business affairs were settled overseas, but her unease didn't subside. She seemed more worried about being left behind. The constant debates drained both Kevin and me. We knew we couldn't take her with us, but we still wanted to offer some consolation. Tired of the ongoing arguments, Kevin suggested a compromise. He would send her on a week-long vacation. Jessica, half pleased and half skeptical, accepted the offer, and Kevin agreed to cover her flight and hotel costs, hoping it would bring some peace. Unfortunately, the tranquility was short-lived. A few days later, while Kevin was focused on the overseas arrangements, Jessica showed up at our house with yet another request. She wanted extra money for shopping during her trip abroad. When I asked about the credit card Kevin had given her, she admitted he had taken it back, fearing she might misuse it due to fluctuating currency rates. I told Jessica that I couldn't authorize any financial assistance without Kevin's consent, and the conversation ended with her storming out in frustration. As the new year arrived, Jessica set off on her 10-day trip. When she returned, she shared a surprising revelation that would completely change our understanding of the situation. Jessica called me, excited about her trip, but soon admitted that she had overspent on souvenirs. Growing increasingly frustrated, I confronted her about the money she claimed I had set aside for her, a sum I had no memory of earmarking. The conversation quickly took a sharp turn. I knew I had savings in my account set aside for business emergencies, but there was no way Jessica could have accessed it without my approval. That's when she casually told me she had found $332,000 in a drawer in the sideboard of our house. I was stunned. Keeping such a large sum of cash at home was unthinkable for us. I told Jessica that if she had indeed taken money without permission, it was theft, no matter that she was family. I emphasized the seriousness of the situation, especially if Kevin had planned to use that money for a business deal. During her trip, there had been no disruptions to our business transactions, which made her claim even more suspicious. Jessica, seemingly unfazed, admitted to using the money, as if simply telling me would make it all okay. I pointed out that taking money without permission was not only unethical, but also illegal. She defended herself by saying that, since we lived so extravagantly, she didn't see any harm in sharing a bit of that lifestyle, suggesting it was like doing a favor for a parent. Her rationale only deepened my concerns about her understanding of boundaries and responsibility. I found her reasoning completely inappropriate. She had taken money without asking, yet showed no remorse or recognition of the seriousness of her actions. She promised that I would talk to Kevin when he returned, confident that he, as her son, would understand. She even nonchalantly remarked that $32,000 wasn't much to him. Though I agreed to pass her message along, I was deeply unsettled by the entire ordeal and her complete lack of awareness. Ending the call, she casually thanked me and asked me to send her regards to Kevin. When Kevin returned that night, still confused about the $32,000 in cash, I confronted him. He explained that he had withdrawn the money 12 days prior for an urgent payment that required cash. I was surprised he had kept such a large sum in a drawer. Given the security risks involved, Kevin seemed troubled as he asked if I knew anything about the cash. That was when I realized the money was indeed his, but we still didn't understand why it was kept in our house or what its intended purpose was. I questioned Kevin further, trying to piece together the mystery. I was perplexed as to why Kevin had left such a large sum of money at home, especially since we usually conducted transactions through bank transfers. Kevin then revealed that, after limiting Jessica's credit card, she had secretly borrowed money from other sources, consumer finance cards and credit cards she had opened without his knowledge. When Kevin discovered this, it added a whole new layer of complexity to our already strained relationship with her. To address her escalating debts, Kevin took decisive action. He collected all of Jessica's credit cards and withdrew cash to pay off her obligations. Despite giving her the money, Kevin was aware of the risk that she might squander it carelessly. This decision shed some light on the situation, though it still didn't explain Jessica's motives. I was inclined to handle the debt repayment directly through bank transfers, thinking this would be more straightforward and traceable. However, Kevin preferred to avoid leaving too many records in our bank accounts to maintain trust with our business partners and keep our bookkeeping clean. So, he chose to withdraw the money and manage the payments personally. Supporting Jessica's overseas trip, though, was more of a parting gesture, acknowledging that once we moved abroad, we wouldn't be as available to her as before. 3. As time passed, Jessica began calling me frequently, up to 136 times a day. Kevin advised me not to engage with her excessive attempts to contact us, but her persistence made me uneasy. One day, I finally picked up, and her voice, tinged with desperation, broke through. She apologized for the constant calls, revealing that she was facing daily demands for payment and that Kevin wasn't responding to her. She turned to me as her last resort for help. I was shocked that Kevin would take such a drastic measure against his own mother, especially if he had set aside money to clear her debts. Had he used it as intended, perhaps Jessica wouldn't be overwhelmed by the calls and letters from collection agencies. Now, she was being bombarded with notices. Unable to resolve her mounting financial problems, the situation was starting to look like something out of a drama series. When Jessica called again, pleading for help, claiming it was a son's duty to assist his mother, I felt the weight of her distress. I mentioned her plea to Kevin when he came home, but his response was unexpectedly harsh. He coldly dismissed her, pointing out that she had squandered her chances to resolve things herself. Despite my desire to help, I decided to block Jessica's number. She was Kevin's mother, and if he had chosen to distance himself, I had little choice but to respect that. As the day of our overseas move grew closer, I found myself surrounded by boxes in our cluttered home, a profound sense of helplessness settling over me regarding Jessica's situation. It soon became clear that things had escalated far beyond what I had imagined. Jessica had to sell her house to settle her debts, a drastic measure that highlighted the severity of her financial troubles. In addition to the $32,000 Kevin had set aside to help her, she had concealed even more debt. The total amount was so vast that even after selling her property, she couldn't fully pay off her obligations. The revelation that her house had to be sold was a painful reminder of just how deep Jessica's troubles ran. Despite all of this, a significant balance remained outstanding, emphasizing the harsh realities of financial mismanagement and its devastating consequences for personal and family life. Kevin, though saddened, realized there was little we could do to prevent the loss of his childhood home. The emotional toll of losing such a personal place, due to his mother's actions, was undoubtedly heavy. Now, Jessica was living in a modest apartment, struggling to manage her remaining debts with a part-time job. Finding work at her age was challenging, and while I felt some sympathy for her, the reality was that her financial mismanagement had led to this situation. It was a stark reminder that, even later in life, taking responsibility for one's actions is crucial. Meanwhile, our business was thriving overseas, opening doors to opportunities one hadn't anticipated. Back home, we began receiving inquiries from various brands, and I found myself navigating offers from unexpected places. This new development significantly broadened our professional horizons. While this success was gratifying, it came with its challenges. My schedule was so packed that finding time to rest was difficult, and Kevin, equally busy with his own responsibilities, was no less stretched. Amid this bustling new life, the idea of starting a family felt like a distant dream. As I gazed out at the foreign cityscape from my window, I reflected on the stark contrast between our thriving new environment and the struggles we had left behind. It underscored the complexities of life, where professional success often coexists with personal challenges and difficult family decisions. Would I ever reconsider letting someone back into my life after they tried to disrupt my marriage? I never thought I would, yet here I am, having done just that. Let me explain. My mother-in-law, Madison, had never been particularly fond of me. It wasn't personal, she was simply overprotective of her son, Raymond. When her husband left her and Raymond was only 3, Madison became deeply attached to him, to the point of unhealthy dependence. Although Raymond recognized this dynamic, he still tried to keep her happy because, after all, she was his mother. Before I entered the picture, Madison had successfully driven away every woman Raymond dated, using extreme measures to ensure her son stayed solely focused on her. When I came along, her tactics didn't change. She did everything in her power to scare me off, but I refused to back down. I loved Raymond deeply, and he always stood by me. When we got engaged, Madison made a personal visit to plead with me to call off the wedding. "I can't lose my only son," she said. "He's all I have." I tried to empathize with her pain, but I stood firm. "Raymond loves you and always will," I told her, "but he loves me too, and we want to build a life together. Why are you trying to ruin his happiness? He will always cherish you, but he's not just yours anymore." Madison's response was chilling. She threatened to ruin me if I didn't end things with Raymond. I refused. In retaliation, she impersonated me to cancel our wedding plans and even tried to have me fired from my job. It was a breaking point for Raymond. Seeing her go to such lengths, he made the painful decision to cut her out of our lives. we had a small, intimate wedding instead and enjoyed 6 peaceful years without Madison's interference. During this time, we welcomed our wonderful son, Arthur. While our life was happy, I could see the pain of Madison's absence weighing on Raymond. His resolve began to waver. Eventually, Madison reached out, begging for forgiveness. She used a new number to contact Raymond and apologized profusely. "Please, Denise," he pleaded with me. "Let's give her another chance. She's all alone, and I want Arthur to have a relationship with his grandmother." I understood his feelings. My own mother had passed away, and I wanted Arthur to experience the bond of having a grandmother. But Madison's betrayal had left deep scars, and I was hesitant. "She seems remorseful," I admitted cautiously, "but let's meet her first, without Arthur, and see if she's truly changed." We met with Madison, and her apologies seemed sincere. After much discussion, we cautiously allowed her back into our lives, starting with supervised visits with Arthur. Madison followed the rules, and though I could sense lingering resentment in her, she remained civil. Raymond was happy to have his mother back, and Arthur began to form a bond with her. For 3 years, everything seemed fine, until Madison requested a day alone with Arthur. "I followed all your guidelines," she argued. "Don't I deserve some trust?" Raymond, eager to support his mother, agreed. Against my better judgment, I relented. When I went to pick Arthur up that evening, the house was locked, and neither Madison nor Arthur was there. Panic began to set in. I tried to stay calm, assuming they'd just gone to the park or out to eat, but as I called Madison repeatedly with no answer, dread began to creep in. Finally, she picked up. Her voice was unsettlingly cheerful. "Oh, Denise, what a surprise." "Madison, where are you?" "I'm here to pick up Arthur, but the house is locked," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Wouldn't you like to know?" she replied, her tone playful and evasive. "Madison, this isn't funny. Tell me where you are. Arthur needs to come home now," I said, irritation seeping into my voice. "No can do, Denise," she said with a sing-song tone. "We're having too much fun to come back just yet." The playful tone in her voice set off alarm bells. "Madison, stop playing games," I said, my patience wearing thin. "Where's my son?" Her voice dropped, chilling me to the bone. "Do you really think you'll ever get him back?" My heart sank. Millions of terrifying thoughts raced through my mind as her words echoed ominously. Trying to keep my composure, I began recording the call. "Madison, this is serious. You need to bring Arthur back now. I'm not joking." "And neither am I," she replied coldly. "He's not coming back, ever." Her declaration froze me in place, my worst fears materializing. Panic surged through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. The stakes were too high to let fear take over. "Madison," I said firmly, "this isn't a game. Return my son, now." "I'm not joking, Denise. I've already told you, you're not getting your son back," Madison taunted, her voice dripping with malice. "Oh, how I wish I could see your face right now," she added with a cruel laugh. "Please, Madison, don't do this. You're scaring me. This isn't okay," I begged, my voice trembling. "I just need Arthur back. Tell me where you are, and I'll come get him." Her response was a chilling burst of laughter, the sound so unnatural it sent a shiver down my spine. My panic deepened as the reality of the situation set in. Part of me hoped it was all a cruel joke or some twisted game, but Madison's next words dashed any lingering hope. "Are you scared, my dear daughter-in-law? Does it make you sad not being able to see your son because of me? How does it feel to have someone take your child away? Why are you saying these things, Madison? What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "This is how I felt when you took my son from me," she spat, her voice filled with venom. "It doesn't feel good to be the victim, does it, Denise?" "Madison, you're acting insane. You don't know what you're doing. Please, stop this madness," I pleaded, my voice rising in desperation. Her rant continued, unhinged and spiteful. "You told me to stop seeing my son. You told me to leave, to cancel the wedding, but I didn't. And then you made him cut ties with me. Did you really think I'd let that go?" Listening to her unravel was one of the most terrifying moments of my life. Every word dripped with hatred, and her fixation on revenge was undeniable. I paced back and forth on her driveway, my thoughts spiraling with fear for Arthur's safety. "Madison, what you're doing is absurd." Raymond chose to go no contact. "It wasn't just me. He made that decision because he loves me, and I love him. If you'd accepted our relationship, you could have still been a part of our lives," I argued, trying to reason with her. "Stop your nonsense. Denise, my son doesn't need you. We were perfectly happy before you came along and ruined everything, she snapped. Madison, you're being delusional. Raymond wasn't going to stay single forever. Life changes, it's natural. You need to accept that we're happy together, I countered. I don't care if you're happy, I'm not, and that's what matters, she shot back. You took my son away, so I took yours. It's only fair. Her words struck me like a thunderclap. She had nursed this resentment for over a decade, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. Tears welled up in my eyes at the thought of her harming my son. Trembling, I switched the phone to loudspeaker and messaged Raymond, detailing the situation while trying to keep Madison talking. Madison, this has to stop. If you're upset with me, fine, but leave Arthur out of this, I implored. Oh, please, I'll do whatever I want. You took my son, so taking yours is only fair, she said coldly. Think about Raymond. You love him, don't you? What you're doing now will only push him further away. He'll resent you for this, I said, hoping to appeal to her maternal instincts. Raymond will come around, he always does, she sneered. Soon it'll be just him, me, and my grandson. We'll be happy without you. You're wrong, Madison. Raymond will never forgive you for this. He's already left his office and is trying to find you, I said firmly, hoping to unnerve her. It won't do him any good. He won't find me or Arthur. I'll tell him where we are once he realizes he made a mistake marrying you, she mocked. Her chilling confidence only fueled my determination. I was done playing her games. I've had enough. Madison, tell me where you are, or I swear I'll call the police, I shouted, my voice trembling with fury and fear. Madison's laughter cut through the phone like a jagged knife, her tone eerily calm and calculated. Go ahead, Denise, call the cops. It won't do you any good, she taunted, her words chilling me to the bone. What do you mean? What have you done with Arthur? I demanded, my voice breaking as panic surged through me. My heart pounded wildly as I stood in her driveway, desperate for answers. I'm not even in your state anymore, Denise, Madison revealed coldly. By the time the cops figure out where we are, we'll already be gone. Her words hit me like a sledgehammer, and I struggled to steady my breathing. You're sick, Madison, you need help. This is psychotic. Her response was venomous, laced with deranged confidence. It's only a matter of time before Raymond comes back to me. Arthur loves me too. We'll be a happy family, without you. You took my son away, Denise, now I'm taking yours. Her twisted logic left me reeling. I gripped the phone tightly, my mind racing with fear for my son. Meanwhile, Raymond was at the police station, filing a report and alerting authorities. I stayed on the call, trying desperately to extract more information. Then, through the phone, I heard a sudden banging noise, followed by Arthur's voice, muffled but unmistakable. Relief and dread washed over me simultaneously. What's going on, Arthur? Why have you locked yourself in the bathroom? Madison's voice snapped, her frustration barely contained. I know what you're trying to do, Grandma, Arthur shouted, defiant and brave. You lied. You said my parents wanted to surprise me, but I heard you on the phone saying you won't take me back to them. His words struck like lightning. My son had seen through her lies and was fighting back. Don't be so dramatic, Arthur, Madison coaxed, her voice dripping with manipulation. We're just having fun. Your dad will be here soon, and then the three of us can live happily without your mom. Hearing Arthur's resistance gave me a glimmer of hope. He was okay. He was fighting. My rage boiled over, and I shouted into the phone, my voice trembling with maternal determination. Arthur, Mommy is here. I promise you. Your dad and I will get you out of this. Be brave for me. Madison scoffed. There's no use, Denise. You're making promises you can't keep. But her words didn't matter. My focus was solely on my son. Arthur, listen to me. You're so brave, and we're coming for you, I said, pouring every ounce of reassurance into my voice. Then, to my astonishment, Arthur's voice came through, calm and composed. Mom, don't worry. I'm okay. I called the police on the hotel's landline, just like you taught me. They're already on their way. A wave of relief crashed over me, and my knees nearly gave out. My son had remembered the safety lessons we'd practiced. Despite his love for his grandmother, he had recognized the danger and acted wisely. What did you do, you little devil? Madison shrieked, her panic evident. You called the cops on me? He knows what to do when someone's unsafe. Madison, I snapped, my confidence returning. Your game is over. Madison's desperation flared. I can still take him away. Denise, he's still with me, and you don't even know where we are. Arthur's voice cut in again, firm and defiant. There's no point, Grandma. The 911 operator says the police are already at the hotel. You can't get me out before they come. Mom, we're in Salt Lake City, Utah. Come and get me. His revelation hit me like a jolt. Madison had taken my son 3 states away, making it nearly impossible to find him without his bravery. You brought me here, Arthur, and it was a mistake, Madison snarled, her voice bitter. You're just like your mother, wicked. But her words no longer mattered. Arthur's courage had turned the tide, and help was already on the way. I was galvanized by the knowledge that help was close at hand, and my son had done everything in his power to ensure his rescue. Madison's audacity left me seething, but my focus remained on reuniting with Arthur and ensuring his safety. After the chilling revelations from Madison, I knew rushing headlong wouldn't resolve the situation. Madison, defiant and delusional, still believed she could manipulate her way out of anything. Your son won't support your insane actions, Madison. He's at the police station right now, reporting you, I told her firmly. No, he wouldn't do that to me. Raymond wouldn't betray his mother, she responded, disbelief lacing her voice. Why don't you ask him then? I replied, I'm already at the police station. At that moment, Raymond arrived. He had been at the station just a few blocks away, working with the police while I kept Madison distracted. His face was a mix of anger and worry, and I handed him the phone as he approached. Mom, what have you done? Raymond's voice trembled with restrained fury. How dare you kidnap my son and expect me to support this? How could you stoop so low? Madison's face hardened with defensive indignation. Why are you so angry with me, Raymond? I just wanted my son back. I wanted you back. I didn't hurt Arthur. I only wanted to teach your wicked wife a lesson. Don't you dare insult my wife or justify your actions. Mom, Raymond retorted sharply, you're the one in the wrong here. After what you've done today, I regret ever letting you back into our lives. How could you say that to me? Madison's voice cracked, oscillating between anger and desperation. I'm your mother. I should come first in your life. Your wife has poisoned you against me. That's enough. Raymond's voice was resolute. The fact that you refuse to take responsibility says it all. I've already filed a police report, and I will be pressing charges. You're going to jail, Mom. Madison's eyes widened in disbelief. You want me to go to jail? Absolutely. You'll pay for what you've done. You're never getting forgiveness. We'll file a restraining order. And you're dead to me. Stay out of our lives forever. Raymond's unflinching stance was both heartbreaking and inspiring. The bond that might have been salvaged was irreparably shattered by Madison's actions. His determination to protect our family and seek justice was unwavering, despite the pain it caused him. Madison's defiance dissolved into desperation when the police arrived at her hotel room. She cried and pleaded, begging us to intervene on her behalf, promising she'd never repeat her mistakes. But it was too late for mercy. Raymond and I embraced, tears flowing as the police took her into custody. Arthur, taken to the station for safety, was finally back in our arms later that evening. The reunion was filled with tears and reassurances. We vowed never to let him out of our sight again and praised his bravery throughout the ordeal. Madison, having spent most of her money on impulsive actions, couldn't post bail. When we informed the family of her deeds, they were appalled and severed ties with her. Alone and abandoned, Madison faced the full weight of her consequences. In court, Madison appeared remorseful, perhaps finally grasping the enormity of her actions. However, her regret came too late. The judge, unmoved, sentenced her to 6 years in prison after a psychological evaluation confirmed her actions stemmed from malice, not madness. With the restraining orders in place, Raymond and I felt a profound sense of relief. Arthur began therapy to process the trauma and, thankfully, remained the bright, joyful child we knew. Back home, free from Madison's toxic influence, we could finally rebuild our lives and cherish every moment together without fear or manipulation.
Now that the elderly patriarch has passed away, I find myself in the role of the eldest son, essentially the decision maker for the family. Allow me to make it clear, the entirety of the inheritance belongs to us. Mom and Nolan will receive nothing. Prepare yourselves for this, and I apologize for the inconvenience, but Ryan would likely prefer it this way. It's more fitting for Aaron, who consistently prioritized Ryan's well-being, to inherit everything, rather than it going to the useless Olivia and Nolan. Despite Ryan's declining health, Aaron and his wife, Grace, never bothered to visit him, despite numerous invitations. After the funeral, their sudden appearance shocked everyone as they made audacious claims about taking the entire inheritance. Nolan, the second son, was visibly upset, and rightfully so. We had always strived to do what was best for Ryan, and Aaron and Grace's unbelievable behavior was intolerable. While pondering this, Nolan finally spoke up, expressing his displeasure. The words he uttered turned Aaron and Grace pale. "I am Olivia, a 71-year-old housewife, living with my husband and Nolan. Ryan, as the second son of a major corporation-owning family, did not take over as CEO, but still had substantial assets. Despite his wealth, Ryan was frugal, detesting wastefulness and encouraging savings. However, Aaron and Grace, who were extravagant and often spent recklessly, faced financial trouble and sought our help regularly. On one occasion, Aaron and Grace approached our home together. Nolan, avoiding them, had gone out. Ignoring our disapproval, Aaron addressed Ryan, saying, 'Dad, we're struggling with our finances this month. Could you help us out a bit?' Ryan, frustrated with their reckless spending, frowned. Grace chimed in, attempting to persuade Ryan, 'You know, we have Colton too. He's about to enter high school and wants to go to a prestigious private school. But private schools are expensive, right? Colton's your beloved grandson. Maybe you could help a little.' Their audacious request, despite needing help, astounded us. However, due to Ryan's deep affection for Colton, he agreed to provide financial assistance, setting strict conditions to prevent wasteful spending and ensuring Colton wouldn't suffer. Aaron and Grace, aware of Ryan's soft spot for Colton, exploited it, using him as a reason to secure the financial support they sought. The same pattern repeated itself, with us reluctantly agreeing to give them money following Ryan's instructions. I transferred a reasonable sum to Aaron and Grace's account, hoping for a positive change in our lives. However, our efforts seemed futile. More misfortune struck when Ryan collapsed, prompting Nolan to call an ambulance. Ryan was diagnosed with advanced cancer, and the treatment offered no guarantees. Devastated by this news, we resolved to support Ryan until the end. I visited the hospital daily, while Nolan, despite working, spent his days off by Ryan's bedside. Yet despite his deteriorating condition, Aaron and his family never visited. Ryan grew increasingly weary and longed to see Colton, whom he adored. Unable to bear seeing Ryan so lonely, I contacted Aaron and Grace, requesting them to visit with Colton. However, they responded dismissively, stating it was a hassle and never showed up. Ryan's battle with cancer lasted about a year, taking a heavy toll on him. After a long struggle, Ryan passed away, leaving an indescribable void. Nolan supported me, even though he must have been hurting too. Despite being overwhelmed with grief, I couldn't help with the funeral arrangements. Aaron and Grace never offered assistance, remaining heartless even in the face of Ryan's death. Ryan's funeral, a quiet affair attended by close family and friends, saw no sign of Aaron and Grace. After the funeral, as Nolan and I placed flowers and sympathy cards on the altar, the doorbell rang. We exchanged glances, realizing it was Aaron and his family. Colton's presence, after such a long absence, felt strange. Aaron casually mentioned they couldn't make it to the funeral due to a family trip they had planned. Grace and Colton followed him into the living room, their audacity astonishing us. Apologetic words seemed insincere, and their lack of empathy hurt deeply. I was even more taken aback when Aaron uttered something unbelievable. "Now that the old man's gone, as the eldest, I'm pretty much in charge. Listen up, the entire inheritance is ours. Mom and Nolan get nothing, just so you know," he declared confidently. In disbelief, I blurted out, "Sorry about this, but Ryan would be happier this way. It's better for the inheritance to go to Aaron," who always considered Ryan first, than to useless Olivia and Nolan. Aaron and Grace's outrageous claims stunned me. After leaving everything to us and enjoying their easy life, they now showed up to claim Ryan's inheritance. I couldn't bear the thought of even a part of the inheritance ending up in Aaron and Grace's hands. While we were struggling with this dilemma, Nolan suddenly spoke up, flipping the situation. "I've been thinking, Colton doesn't really look like Aaron," Nolan stated. Everyone, including Aaron's family and myself, was shocked by this statement. "Now there's no time for this, Nolan. What are you saying? Colton is definitely Aaron's child. He just takes after me." Grace reacted strongly to Nolan's casual remark. Her face turned pale, as if a taboo subject had been broached. "Why are you so flustered?" "I just mentioned it casually because I was curious. Also, Colton doesn't seem to resemble Grace either, or is it just me?" Nolan suggested. As we took a closer look at Colton's face, he didn't seem to resemble Nolan or Grace, especially since Grace claimed he looks like me, which didn't seem quite right. Aaron, apparently thinking the same, turned pale and glared at Grace. "Are you accusing me of cheating? Could Colton not be my son?" Aaron said, grabbing Grace by the collar. Grace frantically denied it, saying, "No, that's not true." But her denial lacked credibility. The situation was escalating, and without intervention, it could spiral out of control. Eventually, Nolan stepped in, saying, "Calm down. It'll all be clear once we do the DNA test." We decided to conduct the test. Grace kept arguing, saying there's no need for that, and doubting our parental bond. Although Aaron complained about this, he seemed determined to take a DNA test with Colton in the near future, not swayed by Grace's words. For a few days, I had little contact with Aaron and Grace, mostly spending my time sorting through Ryan's belongings. Then, one day, the doorbell rang again. As Nolan and I wondered who it could be, Aaron entered the living room alone. It was unusual for him to visit our house by himself. I made coffee and offered him a seat. With a look of humiliation, Aaron placed a document on the table, the DNA test result. It stated that there was no paternal relationship between Colton and Aaron. In other words, Colton wasn't Aaron's child. "I've been deceived by Grace. Colton must be the child of her lover. She betrayed me," Aaron exclaimed, his face turning red with anger. While cheating is undoubtedly wrong, Aaron may deserve some sympathy for being deceived. However, I couldn't find it in me to sympathize with Aaron. We hadn't forgotten Aaron's past unreasonable behavior, and Grace's betrayal didn't justify taking Aaron's side. I wouldn't be satisfied until I thoroughly confronted Grace. "Please help me. Your oldest son was deceived, and you must be upset too. We need to unite as a family now," Aaron pleaded, taking her hands. Still, I couldn't bring myself to cooperate with Aaron, and my feelings were cooling even more. Seeing this, Nolan spoke up. "Sorry, but I can't support you, Aaron. You betrayed Dad too. We haven't forgotten that Aaron was one of those who abandoned Ryan. If he had supported Ryan, then maybe his loneliness would have been lessened." Thinking of this, I couldn't easily forgive Aaron. That was a different time. I was trying to spend time with my family, but they're not our family anymore. Despite our reluctance, we agreed to call Grace. Since the decision to do the DNA test, Grace had been taking Colton out often, rarely coming home. Grace didn't show her face even when Aaron contacted her, so I decided to contact her using Ryan's inheritance as a pretext. I wouldn't normally do this, nor did I want to, but I did because I have a secret plan, Nolan said soon after. The doorbell rang, and it seemed Grace and Colton had arrived. As I opened the door to let them in, Grace frowned at Aaron's jacket hanging next to the door. "You didn't tell me Aaron was here. Did you deceive me, Olivia?" Grace exclaimed, about to leave with Colton. If they left now, calling them under the guise of discussing the inheritance would be pointless. Just as I was wondering how to keep them, Nolan stepped forward. "Wait, Grace, calm down. If you leave now, things might get worse. It's better to talk here where we can control Aaron than alone. It's in your best interest." Certainly, if Grace and Aaron were to talk alone, The outcome could be unpredictable. Aaron might even become violent in his anger. In such cases, probably only Nolan could restrain him. Convinced by Nolan's reasoning, Grace and her family entered the house. As they passed through the living room door, Aaron glared at them. In response, Nolan, urging calmness, said, "Settle down," and then seated everyone and served coffee. Grace and her family looked visibly uncomfortable, but we managed to calm the situation. At that time, I didn't understand why Nolan had chosen such a complicated approach. Why did he need to gather us all here? Wouldn't talking to them individually have worked? But later, thanks to a trump card Nolan revealed, it all became clear. I understood why he had gathered us in that place. The room fell silent, with both Aaron and Grace seeming to gauge each other's reactions. Unable to bear the tension, Grace suddenly apologized, saying, "I'm so sorry. I never intended for this to happen. I was deceived too." Grace, in tears, recounted her story. Her affair had begun over a decade ago with a colleague from her workplace. At the time, she had already been in a relationship with him before meeting Aaron. However, her lover was married with children. Grace claimed they drifted apart, and that's when she met Aaron. Aaron fell for her at first sight and passionately confessed his feelings. Grace, whose feelings for her lover were fading, started dating Aaron and eventually married him. About a year later, Grace reconnected with her distant lover. She hadn't expected to meet him again as she had quit her job by then. Their rekindled romance led to Grace becoming enthralled once more, and that's when she became pregnant with Colton. However, around the same time, her lover moved away with his family, effectively abandoning Grace. She knew it was wrong not to tell Aaron that Colton wasn't his child. But she didn't have the confidence to raise a child alone. So Grace lied that Colton was Aaron's child and continued that lie. If he hadn't left, I would have been honest about the affair and that Colton wasn't Aaron's child. It's all his fault. Grace continued crying. Colton was silent, shocked by the revelation. That doesn't excuse what you did. You betrayed me. You destroyed my happiness, Aaron retorted. Grace's excuses seemed incoherent, and even Aaron couldn't accept such explanations. The argument escalated into a fight, with Aaron and Grace grabbing each other. As if to admonish Aaron and Grace, Nolan clapped his hands, saying, "If you want to fight, go ahead. But I have something important to say too." Nolan's words immediately stopped their quarrel. The mention of the inheritance they were fixated on seemed enough to calm their anger. Seemingly agreeing to a truce, the two sat down. Seeing them seated, Nolan smiled with satisfaction and pulled out an envelope from his pocket. "This is Dad's will. He had it written by a trustworthy lawyer during his time in the hospital. It clearly states how the inheritance is to be divided. I was unaware of the existence of a will. Probably Ryan had directly asked Nolan to arrange for a lawyer." Nolan opened the envelope and began to read the contents of the letter inside. What he read was astonishing. The inheritance would be divided, with half going to my wife Olivia and 1/4 each to my son Nolan and my grandson Colton. The atmosphere changed dramatically as Nolan read this line. Aaron turned pale, exclaiming, "That can't be right." He lunged at Nolan, snatching the will and reading it, his eyes widening to their limits. "How can this be? Why is there nothing for me?" As the eldest son, Aaron had always assumed with certainty that he would receive a larger share of the inheritance. Yet hearing that he wasn't allocated even a small part, Aaron couldn't possibly accept it. Disheartened, he slumped to the ground, repeatedly reading the will, hoping for a different outcome. However, the content remained unchanged. Taking the will from Aaron, I reread it to confirm, and it seemed there was no mistake in what Nolan had read. Naturally, Aaron, you and your wife had received substantial support from Dad. Dad was well aware that all the money was being used for your frivolities. That's why he decided not to leave anything for you. Nolan spoke calmly. Ryan's secret trump card had indeed managed to plunge Aaron into despair. By the way, I've already informed your parents, as per Dad's instructions, that the portion of the inheritance going to Colton will be temporarily held by your parents. So it's better not to think you can misuse Colton's inheritance, Nolan continued. Aaron was left questioning how this could be. It seemed that Nolan and Ryan had carefully acted to prevent selfish wastage. In that case, surely the portion allocated to Colton would be used for his future. Ryan had been concerned about Colton until the end. The two issues that surrounded us, Grace's infidelity and Ryan's inheritance, were finally resolved. We no longer needed to devote time to Aaron and Grace. After the discussion, Aaron's family returned home, looking dejected. The next steps were for them to discuss among themselves. As expected, Aaron and Grace ended up divorcing. We who had heard Grace's confession that day became undeniable witnesses, and Aaron demanded substantial compensation from Grace. Further disputes arose over the custody of Colton, as both wanted sole custody, knowing that Colton would eventually secure the inheritance. Myself, Nolan, and Grace's parents intervened in the negotiations. Eventually, it was decided that Colton would stay with Grace's parents until he came of age. Once the divorce was finalized, Aaron started visiting our house frequently, saying, "Let's live together." Feeling unable to accept him as family after all had transpired, we moved out, almost fleeing from Aaron. We changed our contact details, making it unlikely for Aaron to reach us. Grace, for her part, seems to be having a tough time. From what I've heard, her parents are furious over the incident. They paid the compensation, but until she repays it in full, she's not even allowed to see Colton. Meanwhile, we are living a happy life, following Ryan's philosophy. We carefully save the inheritance we received and make sure not to squander it, even though we have money. Since then, Nolan has been working diligently and was recognized for his abilities. John from B asked him, "Why don't you come to work for our company?" So he changed jobs, and now he seems to be an executive at the company where John is the CEO. I still consider Colton my grandson despite everything that happened, so I asked Grace's parents if I could visit him. He recently got into his first choice high school, so we celebrated by going out for a delicious meal. The incident with Aaron and Grace remains a deep emotional scar, but it also taught us the importance of relationships. I will use this lesson to live my life going forward.